Chapter 857. Lu Ming, let's go. Let's leave this place first and find a place to recuperate, Yan Kuangkuang said. His quintessence wrapped around Lu Ming. Then, he tore space apart, and the two's figures disappeared. One day later, they had already left the Emperor Heaven Divine Palace's territory and entered the Talisman Puppet Sect's territory. The territory that the Talisman Puppet Sect occupied was much smaller than the Emperor Heaven Divine Palace's. However, it still had more than 30 large regions. There was a small lake between the vast mountains, looking like a resplendent pearl. Lu Ming sat cross-legged by the lake and circulated the true dragon battle art to treat his injuries. Yan Kuangtu sat cross-legged on a tall mountain several li away, also treating his injuries. Back then, when Yan Kuangtu fought with Martial Monarch De, he was also injured. Nine Dragon City was not calm. Although the great battle was over, the commotion caused by it spread far and wide. Countless people discussed this matter. The names of Lu Ming, Yan Kuangtu, and Supreme Nine Sons were discussed by countless people. There was a divine nine-dragon cauldron guarding the heads of the 9 dragon veins. After the great battle, the 9 divine cauldrons returned to their old places. They were like immemorial divine mountains, unmoving for eternity. Countless people went to the heads of the 9 dragon veins to observe. Many people even went forward, hoping to imitate Lu Ming and pull out the cauldrons. Unfortunately, they were destined to be disappointed. How could they touch the divine cauldrons that martial monarchs could not? Why? Why can Lu Ming pull out the cauldrons and even summon the 9 cauldrons while others can't? What secret does he have? Perhaps he obtained the divine 9 dragon cauldrons acknowledgement? Acknowledgement? There are conditions for that. I heard that it has something to do with Lu Ming's bloodline. It is said that Martial Monarch De made a move for this bloodline. Now that Lu Ming is not dead, do you think he will return one day and summon the 9 cauldrons? Shoo! Be quiet. Do you want to die? Countless people discussed this. However, when it came to sensitive topics, they were all careful. No matter how the wind blew, the 9 cauldrons did not move, as if they were waiting for their master. Time flew by quickly. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. Beside the small lake, a faint light appeared on Lu Ming's body, and a sound like a tsunami came from his body. After a while, the sound subsided and Lu Ming opened his eyes. My injuries have been healed. Unfortunately, the 9 dragons' bloodline exploded its golden chakra and returned to level 9 king realm. But it doesn't matter. As long as I have enough essence and blood, I will soon reach the level of God realm. Lu Ming thought to himself. Strength, strength, my strength is still too weak. The difference between me and those experts is too great. Lu Ming couldn't help but clench his fists. After this battle, Lu Ming clearly saw the gap between himself and the top experts of the Eastern Barren Territory. In front of Martial Emperor De, he was like an ant. There was no way he could compare with him. There were also exalts and domain enlightened spirit gods. All of them were terrifying and shocking, and they were much stronger than him. His strength was too weak. Being weak meant that he was in a passive position. Strength, everything was because of strength. He had to increase his strength as soon as possible. Shao Qin, wait for me in the central continent. I will definitely go to the central continent and take you away. That day won't be too far away. Lu Ming's eyes were filled with determination. This time, he understood that he was being impulsive. But who hadn't been impulsive when they were young? Moreover, he was facing the person he loved. He had to watch her go to a place she didn't want to go and suffer. How could he be indifferent? The key was that he was not strong enough. If he was strong enough, he could break through all obstacles. Who could stop him? It was the second time in his life that Lu Ming desired strength so much. The first time was when Lu Yao took away his bloodline and wanted to take over the Lu clan. At that time, Lu Ming desired strength. With strength, he could defeat Lu Yao and regain control of the Lu clan and his own fate. he could stop Li Ping from being bullied. Now, he desired strength. With strength, he could take Xian Yanqing away, fight against Martial Emperor De, and protect his family and friends. After taking a few deep breaths, Lu Ming calmed himself down. Where did that fellow Dandan run off to? At this moment, Lu Ming thought of Dandan. Previously, during the battle in Jiulong City, Dandan had slipped away. No one knew where he went. That guy is very cunning. He should be fine. Lu Ming thought. Lu Ming, how are your injuries? Yan Kuangtu appeared beside Lu Ming and asked. I've recovered. Lu Ming stood up and said. Well, let's go to the Talisman Puppet Sect's Yin and Yang Mountain. I'm an old friend of the Talisman faction. I've already informed him. Yan Kuangtu said. Thank you, Brother Yan. Lu Ming cupped his fists and said. Huh, why are you being so polite with me? Speaking of which, we are brothers. It's just that Master didn't accept you as his disciple. Yan Kuangtu laughed. Immediately, Yan Kuangtu tore the space apart and rushed to the Yin and Yang Mountain with Lu Ming. Half a day later, an incomparably huge mountain appeared in front of Lu Ming. Although they were separated by an unknown distance, Lu Ming could still feel the majesty and magnificence of the Yin and Yang Mountain while standing high in the sky. The Yin and Yang Mountain was the headquarters of the Talisman Puppet Sect. It was formed by two incomparably huge mountains. The two mountains were like two Yin and Yang fishes intertwined with each other, forming the shape of Yin and Yang. Even though there was a great distance between them, Lu Ming could still feel a vast pressure spreading toward him. It pressed down on his heart and his sea of consciousness, causing his mental flame to flicker. The two mountains formed a natural formation with the help of the inscription formation. Is this the Yin and Yang Mountain that is said to be unbreakable by martial emperors? It's really a creation of heaven and earth. Lu Ming exclaimed inwardly. He could feel that the Yin and Yang Mountain was surrounded by terrifying killing formations. Once a strong enemy approached, it would surely unleash a deadly attack. This was the headquarters of the Talisman Puppet Sect. After countless years, terrifying killing formations had been engraved here, which was what the Talisman Puppet Sect relied on. Although the Talisman Puppet Sect did not have a martial emperor now, it was still considered one of the four overlord factions. Even Martial Emperor De could not do anything about it. Buzz. At that instant, the space ahead suddenly fluctuated. Following it, the space was torn apart and a figure stepped out from it. It was a middle-aged man with a long beard. He was wearing a Tai Chi robe and had an otherworldly aura. His eyes were filled with wisdom. As soon as he appeared, he swept his gaze across Yan Kuangtu and Lu Ming and said, Yan Kuangtu, you guys have really caused a big commotion. The battle in Nine Dragon City has made you famous in the eastern wilderness. Now, I'm afraid some of the bigger forces have heard about it. Bai Shijin, are you making fun of me? Yan Kuangtu took a sip of wine and said casually. He then introduced the man to Lu Ming. This man is Bai Shijin, the leader of the Talisman faction of the Talisman Puppet Sect. He's an old acquaintance of mine. Lu Ming's heart shuddered. So this man is the leader of the Talisman faction. Currently, the Talisman Puppet Sect was divided into two factions, the Talisman faction and the Puppet faction. The two factions were not willing to submit to each other and were constantly in conflict. You are Lu Ming, right? Your name is quite famous now. I heard that the battle at Nine Dragon City was caused by you. I'm quite curious. What is it that made De personally take action? Chapter 858. Bai Shijin, let's talk about this later. Let's talk about business first. Yan Kuangtu said. Business? Yan Kuangtu, you two aren't really thinking of joining my Talisman Puppet Sect, are you? Speaking of which, Sky Monster Valley and Heavenly Corpse Sect are better choices. With the help of Heavenly Corpse Sect or Sky Monster Valley, we can better fight against Emperor Heavenly Divine Palace and De, right? Bai Shijin stroked his beard and said. Bai Shijin, you're wrong. I'm not here to join the Talisman Puppet sect, but to help Lu Ming take charge of the Talisman Puppet sect. Yan Kuangtu was very direct and went straight to the point. What did you say? Bai Shijin's body suddenly erupted with a powerful aura. His eyes turned cold as he stared at Yan Kuangtu and said, Yan Kuangtu, this joke is not funny at all. It's not funny, but it's not a joke. I'll tell you directly. Lu Ming is the successor of Senior Liaozong. Yan Kuangtu said. What? What did you say? This time, Bai Shijin almost screamed, completely unable to control his emotions. His eyes were wide open as he looked at Lu Ming in shock. The successor of Senior Master Liaozong? You've seen Senior Master Liaozong? He's been missing for 3,000 years, where did you see him? Don't try to lie to me. A bunch of questions popped out of Bai Shijin's mouth. Senior Bai, whether it's true or not, you'll know when you see this. Lu Ming stepped forward and waved his hand. The 10,000 formation illustration appeared in his hand. The illustration opened and a powerful aura spread out. There were mountains, rivers, lakes, and seas engraved on it. It was incomparably mysterious. Bai Shijin's pupils shrank rapidly as he stared at the 10,000 formation illustration in Lu Ming's hand. He muttered to himself, 10,000 formation illustration, it's really the 10,000 formation illustration. What happened to Senior Master Liaozong? Why did he disappear for 3,000 years? I'm afraid Senior Master Liaozong doesn't have much time left. Lu Ming sighed. What's going on? What's going on? Bai Shijin stared at Lu Ming as if he wanted to see through Lu. Bai Shijin, I have the myriad formation illustration. Do you still not believe me? Yan Kuangtu said coldly. The 10,000 formation illustration is Patriarch Liansong's divine weapon. At the same time, it is also the Talisman Puppet cult's heirloom. If it wasn't passed down personally by Patriarch Liansong, none of you would have been able to obtain it. Even emperors wouldn't be able to obtain it. Since Lu Ming was able to obtain it, I naturally believe him. Where is Patriarch Liansong now? I want to know. Bai Shijin said. It's like this. Immediately, Lu Ming briefly told him about his encounter with Liansong. What? Was the Patriarch assassinated by DE? Damn, despicable and shameless DE. After listening to Lu Ming's explanation, Bai Shijin roared in anger. He really didn't expect Liaozong to be harmed by DE back then. Then, Di Tian Divine Palace slowly encroached on the Talisman Puppet sect's territory, causing the Talisman Puppet sect's strength to become weaker and weaker. Bai Shijin, now you know the whole story. Lu Ming is the successor of Patriarch Liansong. He was entrusted by Patriarch Liansong to take charge of the Talisman Puppet cult. Are you going to go against Patriarch Liansong's order? Yan Kuangtu stared at Bai Shijin and said in a deep voice. Bai Shijin's face darkened as if he was thinking about something. After a while, he said, I was greatly indebted to Patriarch Liansong. Without Patriarch Liansong, I wouldn't be where I am today. Patriarch Liansong's grace is something that I would never dare to ask for. How could I go against Patriarch Liansong's order? But Talisman Puppet cult is not something that I can decide. There are still elders in the Talisman Puppet cult. Humph, you mean they won't respect Liansong's order? Yan Kuangtu said coldly. If Patriarch Liansong's real body was here, they naturally wouldn't dare. But now, Lu Ming is just a junior. With the 10,000 formation illustration, I'm afraid it's very difficult. Bai Shijin said with a sigh. Senior Bai, how can we know if we don't try? Lu Ming said with a smile. Alright, follow me into the Talisman Puppet cult first. I'll gather the elders of the two sects and make a decision together. Bai Shijin said after thinking for a while. Alright, let's do that. Yan Kuangtu nodded. Then, Bai Shijin tore the space apart. The two of them followed Bai Shijin and stepped into the space. Following Bai Shijin would naturally not be attacked by the formation. Otherwise, even if they tore the space apart, they would still be attacked by the formation. In the next moment, the space trembled. Lu Ming, Yan Kuangtu, and Bai Shijin appeared in a courtyard. Yan Kuangtu, Lu Ming, you two stay here for the night. Tomorrow, I'll gather the upper echelons and elders of the two sects and make a decision together. Then, you two can go together. Bai Shijin said. Lu Ming and Yan Kuangtu nodded. Then, Bai Shijin left. Brother Yan, can we trust Bai Shijin if we just enter the talisman puppet cult like this? Lu Ming asked Yan Kuangtu. If Bai Shijin had bad intentions, wouldn't it be very dangerous for them to enter this place? Lu Ming, you can rest assured. Bai Shijin is an old friend of Master. We've known each other for many years. He's a very righteous person. Moreover, he was taught by Senior Liaozong. Although he's a disciple's grandson, he's no different from a disciple. He's very loyal to Senior Liaozong. Yan Kuangtu said. That's good then. Lu Ming said. Thus, they decided to stay here. A day passed in the blink of an eye. On the second day, people from the Liaozong sect came and led them to the conference hall. In a huge hall, there were more than a dozen figures sitting. There were men and women in the group. Some of them looked middle-aged, and some of them were white-haired old men. At the top, on the left, sat Bai Shijin. On the right, sat a white-haired elder with a sage-like demeanor. This elder was the current leader of the Talisman sect, Du Songjue. The people in the hall were the most senior elders of the Talisman puppet cult. Some of them were equivalent to supremes, while the weakest was equivalent to a peak 9th level spirit god. They were the people with the highest status in the Talisman puppet cult. Bai Shijin, you've gathered all of us here, saying that you have something important to discuss. What's the matter? Can you tell us now? On the right, a middle-aged man with a burly appearance spoke. This person was a senior elder of the Talisman sect. His name was Meng Chong, and he was extremely powerful, equivalent to a supremes. Currently, the Talisman puppet cult only had a total of 5 supremes. One could imagine how powerful this person was in the Talisman puppet cult. Not everyone is here yet. I'll tell you when they're all here. Bai Shijin said. Not everyone is here yet. The upper echelons of both our sects are here. Who else are we waiting for? Meng Chong said. They're waiting for us. A rough voice came from outside the hall. Then, 2 figures walked in from outside. Yan Kuangtu, it's you? As soon as Meng Chong saw Yan Kuangtu, he suddenly stood up. A silver light flickered between his eyebrows. However, there were traces of faint golden light mixed within the silver light. A powerful aura spread out. The faint golden light meant that the spirit fire was about to transform into a golden color. A golden spirit fire was equivalent to a 9th level inscription master, equivalent to an Emperor realm expert. Chapter 859. Bang! A powerful aura burst out from Yan Kuangtu's body as he stared at Meng Chong and said, Meng Chong, what are you yelling for? Are you surprised to see me? Humph. Of course I'm surprised to see you. Who doesn't know about the battle at 9 Dragon City? Yan Kuangtu, so you've escaped from 9 Dragon City and came to the Duality Mountain to join our Talisman puppet sect. Bai Shijin, you've gathered us here to discuss Yan Kuangtu joining us, right? I object. If Martial Emperor De knew that Yan Kuangtu had joined us, it would be a great loss if he waged a war against us. Meng Chong said in a loud voice. That's right. Although Yan Kuangtu's strength is strong, it's not worth offending Martial Emperor De. The other elders of the puppeteer sect spoke too. Lu Ming watched coldly. It was said that the puppeteer sect had the intention to join Martial Emperor De. It seemed like it was true. However, Bai Shijin and the elders of the Talisman puppet sect remained silent. Meng Chong, I think you're overthinking it. I'm not here to join you. I'm here because of brother Lu Ming. Yan Kuangtu burst out laughing. Lu Ming? The others glanced at Lu Ming. Their eyes were filled with curiosity. They were curious why such a young man would cause a battle at Nine Dragon City, to the point that even Martial Emperor De was involved. He's Lu Ming. It said that the battle at Nine Dragon City was because of him. You're asking us to protect him, right? No way. How is it possible to offend Martial Emperor De because of him? Yan Kuangtu, I advise you to leave at once. There's no room for discussion. Meng Chong said. Who says Lu Ming is here to join the Talisman Puppet Sect? He's here to take charge of the Talisman Puppet Sect. Yan Kuangtu said with a grin. Silence. The hall suddenly became quiet. The elders of the Talisman Puppet Sect were stunned. They looked at Yan Kuangtu and Lu Ming in a daze. Ha ha ha, Yan Kuangtu, I think you're crazy. You've lost your mind after being beaten by Martial Emperor De in Nine Dragon City. You've come to the Talisman Puppet Sect? A kid? Taking charge of the talisman? What a joke, what a joke. After quite a while, Meng Chong laughed out crazily. The others also looked at Yan Kuangtu as if they were looking at a madman. Yan Kuangtu curled his lips and did not seem to mind. He took out his wine gourd and drank a mouthful of wine. After which, he said in an indifferent tone, if Lu Ming is the successor of Senior Liansong and is entrusted by Senior Liansong to take charge of the Talisman Puppet Sect, I wonder if that is possible? Silence. The hall suddenly became quiet again, so quiet that even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard. Nonsense. Ancestor Liansong has been missing for 3,000 years. How could he have obtained his legacy? It was still Meng Chong who spoke. Du Songjue's eyes flickered as he glanced at the expressionless Bai Shijin. I wonder if this can be proven. At this moment, Lu Ming took a step forward, and the myriad formation illustration appeared in his hand. All of a sudden, everyone in the hall focused their attention on the myriad formation illustration. Hiss hiss hiss, then, a series of gasps could be heard. Myriad formation illustration, it's actually the myriad formation illustration. Oh my god, the myriad formation illustration has reappeared. The myriad formation illustration is the divine weapon of sect leader Liansong, and also his keepsake. Without sect leader Liansong's personal guidance, no one can control it. Could he really be the successor of sect leader Liansong? Exclamations could be heard in the hall. Each of the elders' glabella flickered with silver light, and their spiritual fire jumped. Their spiritual power was like a spiritual storm that filled the hall, forming a strong pressure. Myriad formation illustration, kid, where did you get it? Quickly hand it over. Meng Chong suddenly stood up, and a terrifying pressure spread out from his glabella, pressing down on Lu Ming. His eyes flickered with greed. If he could obtain the myriad formation illustration, then the puppet sect would be able to command the entire Talisman Puppet Sect. Du Songjue's eyes flickered, and the spiritual fire between his glabella jumped. Obviously, he was also very excited. Bang! Yan Kuangtu took a step forward, and a powerful aura rushed out, covering Lu Ming's body to resist the pressure. What? You want to go against Senior Liansong's order and snatch the myriad formation illustration? Yan Kuangtu's eyes were cold. The myriad formation illustration is a sacred object of the Talisman Puppet Sect. How can it be controlled by a kid? Quickly hand over the myriad formation illustration and tell us about the situation with Senior Master Liansong, and we can let you leave safely. Meng Chong said coldly. What a joke, Meng Chong, believe it or not, I will cripple you. Yan Kuangtu roared, and golden flames of the golden crow spread out from his body. A violent aura rushed towards Meng Chong, causing the aura in the hall to suddenly rise. Meng Chong's face changed greatly, and his spiritual fire jumped. In front of him, dense inscriptions suddenly spread out, forming an inscription formation to resist Yan Kuangtu's pressure. At the same time, he shouted, Yan Kuangtu, although your battle strength is strong, this is the Talisman Puppet Sect. If we fight, you will definitely die. It's enough to kill you. Yan Kuangtu said loudly, incomparably domineering. Meng Chong and the others of the puppet sect looked very serious. They thought of the Battle of 9 Dragons. In the Battle of 9 Dragons, Yan Kuangtu's battle strength was invincible, and he was able to fight against 3 supremes. His battle strength had reached a terrifying level. If they really fought, even if they could defeat Yan Kuangtu, they would have to pay a heavy price. Meng Chong, Brother Kuangtu, we are all old acquaintances. Why do we have to be hostile? Sit down and talk slowly. At this time, Du Songjue, who had been silent all this time, said with a smile. Meng Chong snorted coldly and sat down again. Yan Kuangtu chuckled, and the aura on his body also converged. Lu Ming did not speak, and sighed slightly in his heart. He had long known that it would not be so easy to control the talisman puppet sect with just the myriad formation illustration. If Yan Kuangtu was not there, he believed that the people of the talisman puppet sect would definitely kill him and then seize the myriad formation illustration, without the slightest room for negotiation. This was strength. Only with strength would there be room for negotiation. Lu Ming has inherited the mantle of Grandmaster Liansong. This cannot be wrong. Otherwise, he would not be able to control the myriad formation illustration. At this time, Bai Shijin slowly spoke. This is indeed the case. The other elders of the talisman puppet sect nodded their heads. So what if that's the case? Letting a kid like him control the talisman puppet sect? Besides, he has offended Martial Emperor De. It will be a disaster if Martial Emperor De comes to us. Meng Chong harumphed coldly. Meng Chong, I know that the puppet sect wants to rely on Martial Emperor De, but is De worth it? My master, the 9 Sons Supreme, has contributed a lot to De, but he still killed him easily. If you rely on him, you might end up in the same situation. Yan Kuangtu chuckled. Du Songjue, Meng Chong, and the others of the puppet sect were startled, but they did not say anything. Besides, I'll tell you one more thing. Don't you want to know why Senior Liansong suddenly disappeared? He was assassinated by De. Only a wisp of his soul was left and he escaped underground. Chapter 860. Other than Bai Shijin, who knew about this beforehand, the others were so shocked that they almost jumped up. What? Sect leader Liaosong was killed by Martial Emperor De? How is that possible? How could such a thing happen? The founding elders were shocked, especially the founding elders of the puppet faction, who were even more shocked. It's true. Master said it himself. The million formation illustration is now half destroyed because Master was severely injured in the battle with De. Lu Ming said loudly. After Lu Ming finished speaking, a figure stepped out from his forehead. It was Supreme 9 Sons. Supreme 9 Sons. The people of the talisman puppet sect looked at Supreme 9 Sons. Many of them were old acquaintances of Supreme 9 Sons. Everyone, what Lu Ming said is true. I met Senior Liaosong once underground. Supreme 9 Sons said. Supreme 9 Sons' words made everyone fall into silence. Master, you were actually killed by Martial Emperor De. Du Songjue mumbled to himself. Du Songjue was Liaosong's direct disciple. So, do you still want to join De? If the other disciples of the Talisman Puppet sect knew that the sect leader, the leader of the Talisman Puppet sect, was killed by Martial Emperor De, and you want to join him instead, what would they think? Yan Kuangtu sneered. Meng Chong and the other founding elders of the puppet faction had ugly expressions. De had killed Liaosong and then invaded the territory of the Talisman Puppet sect. He was their mortal enemy. How could they join De? If the other disciples knew about this, many of them would rebel. Since De had killed Liaosong, why would he take them in? Why would he not guard against them? This path was obviously impossible. What the Talisman Puppet sect can do now is to unite and accumulate strength to fight against De Tian Divine Palace and Martial Emperor De. Otherwise, we will be defeated. Yan Kuangtu said loudly. Ridiculous. How can we fight against Martial Emperor De? Who can fight against De without becoming an emperor? Meng Chong sneered. The others nodded. If someone can break through to the Martial Emperor realm, they can fight against De and even kill him. Yan Kuangtu said. Breaking through to the Martial Royal realm? It's not that easy. How many peerless geniuses have been born in the Eastern continent for the past 10,000 years? How many of them were able to break through to the Martial Royal realm? On average, there would only be one every few thousand years. Yan Kuangtu, you are known as the genius of the Emperor Heaven Divine Palace that only appears once every 1,000 years. Can you do it? Are you confident? Meng Chong looked at Yan Kuangtu mockingly. I might not be able to, but Lu Ming definitely can. Yan Kuangtu said. Him? What right does a little brat have? Ridiculous. Meng Chong sneered. I think so too. Senior Liao Tsang thinks so too. Supreme Nine Sun said, silencing Meng Chong. The Talisman Puppet sect members involuntarily gathered their gazes onto Lu Ming once again. They couldn't help but think of the rumors about Lu Ming. Even Emperor De was willing to help him. Yan Kuangtu and the Nine Sun Supreme, these two peerless Nine Sun Supremes trusted him so much. Besides, why was Liao Tsang willing to pass down his mantle to him? What was so special about him? Why was he worthy of the attention of so many authorities? Important. Everyone, since Lu Ming has obtained the inheritance of our ancestor, we can't disobey his orders. At that instant, Bai Shijin spoke once again. This is a serious matter that concerns the future of the Talisman Puppet sect. We have to consider it carefully, unless Lu Ming can prove that he is worthy of us taking such a huge risk. Du Songjue said. That's right. Besides, I've heard that this brat is very talented in martial arts. However, if he wants to control the Talisman Puppet sect, he can't rely on his martial arts. Brat, show us your spiritual rings. Meng Chong said coldly. Lu Ming wore a smile on his face. It was obvious that the people of the puppet sect were starting to relax. This was a good start. Seniors, if you want to take a look, let's have a look. Lu Ming stepped forward and brought his fists together. Meanwhile, his glabella glowed as spiritual rings appeared above his head. There were a total of 6 of them. Crimson, orange, yellow, green, blue, and blue. 6 different colors, 6 spiritual rings. The hall fell into silence once again. Everyone widened their eyes and mouths as they stared at Lu Ming in a daze. They stared at the mental energy ring above his head with an incredulous expression. Perfect, all perfect. The first 5 ranks are perfect. How is this possible? How is this possible? Meng Chong's mouth was wide open as if he had just swallowed a dead mouse. Genius, a peerless genius. Such talent is comparable to Patriarch Liao Tsang's. Yeah, Patriarch Liao Tsang achieved perfect mastery in the first 5 ranks, and lit up 9 spiritual rings for the 6th rank. Lu Ming has a chance to reach Patriarch Liao Tsang's level. The elders of the Talisman Puppet sect discussed in astonishment. Bai Shijin was also dumbfounded and shocked. The reason why he stood on Lu Ming's side previously was mainly because of Liao Tsang's legacy. No matter who Liao Tsang's legacy was passed down to, he would support it. However, he did not expect Lu Ming's inscription talent to be so terrifying. The first 5 ranks were perfect mastery. Apart from Liao Tsang, no one in the Talisman Puppet sect had achieved that in the past 10,000 years. On the side, Yan Kuangtu was also dumbfounded. He did not know that Lu Ming's talent in the Tao of inscription was so terrifying. He could not help but smile wryly. To be able to achieve such a feat while cultivating both martial and inscription. This kid is incredible. No wonder Patriarch Liao Tsang is interested in him. Perhaps he can revitalize our Talisman Puppet sect in the future? It's hard to say. The elders of the talisman puppet sect discussed. By Shijin, this is a serious matter. Let's discuss it. Du Songjue glanced at Bai Shijin. Bai Shijin nodded and said, I called you here to discuss it. He then looked at Lu Ming, Yan Kuangtu, and the others and said, why don't you wait outside the hall? We need to discuss it. Sure, please go ahead. Lu Ming brought his fists together and walked out of the hall with Yan Kuangtu. It's almost done, but it's impossible for Lu Ming to take charge of the talisman puppet sect. I think the talisman puppet sect will give Lu Ming some tests. Supreme Nine Sun said. There's no problem with a test. Lu Ming smiled confidently. Following this, they waited in silence. This wait lasted for 3 hours. Only then did someone inform them to re-enter the main hall. Lu Ming, you're still young and your cultivation is still low. I'm afraid most people won't be convinced if you take charge of the talisman puppet sect, which will only bring more trouble. Let's discuss with the elders and make you one of the Zongzi candidates. What do you think? Bai Shijin was the first to speak. Chapter 861. Thank you so much, seniors. Lu Ming cupped his fists and thanked them. It was already very rare to become a Zongzi candidate. After all, Lu Ming had just arrived and he had to rely on the deterrence of Yan Kuangtu and Supreme Nine Yang to achieve this. If he had come alone, these big shots would not have compromised and he would not have had a chance to show off. First, he would become a Zongzi candidate. Then, he would have to fight for it himself. Yes. Du Songjue and the others nodded. They were satisfied with Lu Ming's humble attitude. First, you can become a Zongzi candidate. But if you want to become an official Zongzi and take charge of the talisman puppet sect in the future, there is another condition. Du Songjue said slowly. Here it comes. Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat. He knew that there must be a condition. It could not be that simple. Senior, please tell me. Lu Ming said. The condition is that you must stand out in the upcoming Battle of Providence and win first place. Then, after the Battle of Providence, you can immediately become an official Zongzi. Du Songjue said. Then, the sect leaders and elders of the Talisman Puppet Sect, Talisman Faction, and Puppet Faction all stared at Lu Ming. Before Lu Ming could speak, Yan Kuangtu shouted, What? Win first place in the Battle of Providence? How is that possible? Lu Ming has only cultivated for a short time. You are deliberately making things difficult for him. This condition is too difficult. Change it. Win first place in the Battle of Providence? Even though Yan Kuangtu was mentally prepared, he was still shocked. He did not doubt Lu Ming's talent, but Lu Ming's cultivation time was shorter than the other geniuses. The top 100 geniuses on the list of top 1,000 talents were each more abnormal than the other. The top 10 geniuses were even more terrifying. Moreover, there were many new geniuses who were also very bright. No one knew how strong they were. This was only for the human clan. The heavenly demon tribe also had many descendants with powerful bloodlines. It was too difficult to win first place. They were deliberately making things difficult for him. Yan Kuangtu, this condition is indeed difficult. But to break through to the Martial Emperor realm and fight against DE is even more difficult. In the Eastern Wasteland, there is only one Martial Emperor every few thousand years. How many geniuses will there be in the Eastern Wasteland? It's hard to count. Even in this golden age where geniuses come forth in large numbers, those who can break through to the Martial Emperor realm in the future are few and far between. Lu Ming must suppress this era. Only then will he have the opportunity to break through to the Martial Emperor realm. Only then will he have the opportunity to fight and even defeat DE. Meng Chang's eyes shone brightly as he shouted. Yan Kuangtu remained silent. He knew that what Meng Chong said made sense. Good. I agree. A clear voice suddenly rang out. Many people's eyes lit up as they looked at Lu Ming. Lu Ming stood quietly in the hall. His body was ramrod straight, and his eyes were filled with determination and confidence. First place in the Battle of Providence? He had to do it, he had to do it. Just like what Meng Chong said, if he couldn't do it, how could he fight against De? Anyone who could reach the martial emperor realm was a legend, a legend. And he had to create his own legend. Although he knew that it would be difficult, there was only motivation when there was pressure. Good, then it's a deal. If you can obtain first place in the Battle of Providence, you will bring great luck to the Talisman Puppet Sect. At that time, I will not go back on my words and will assist you to become the Talisman Puppet Sect Master. Anyone who wants to stop you will have to go through me first. Du Songjue stood up, his voice was sonorous and powerful. In the past, the Marionette Sect wanted to rely on Martial Emperor De because they were afraid that the Talisman Puppet Sect would be destroyed. They just wanted to leave behind some legacy, not because they were afraid of death. This is also what I want to say. Furthermore, Lu Ming, if you really obtain first place, I believe that no one in the Talisman Puppet Sect will object. Bai Shijin also spoke. The other founding elders also nodded their heads. Seniors, don't worry. Lu Ming will do it. Lu Ming said in a firm voice. All right, it's settled then. One more thing, it's better if you don't use your real name now. If De knows that you're here at the Talisman Puppet Sect, it will be troublesome. You can use a fake name for now. Bai Shijin suggested. I'll use the name Tianyun from today onward. Lu Ming said after a slight hesitation. Tianyun. He had used the name Tianyun in the Blazing Sun Empire, but not many people knew about it. Alright, that's all for today. I'll send out a notice in a few days to inform the whole sect that you've become a Zongzi candidate. Farewell. Du Songjue rose from his seat and left. Meng Chong and the others also rose from their seats and left. In the end, the founding elders of the Talisman faction left too. Only Bai Shijin, Yan Kuangtu, and Lu Ming were left in the hall. Lu Ming, it's up to you now. I'll give you the token of a Zongzi candidate in a few days. At that time, you'll be able to enter the sacred cultivation grounds of the Talisman Puppet Sect as you wish. Also, I've already informed my disciple to arrange a new place for you to stay later. Bai Shijin said with a smile. Thank you, Senior Bai. Lu Ming thanked him sincerely. This time, Bai Shijin had helped him a lot by standing on his side. At this moment, a round bead flew out from between Lu Ming's eyebrows. It was Supreme Nine Sun's soul-gathering bead. It flew to Yan Kuangtu, who grabbed it. Lu Ming, you'll cultivate in the Talisman Puppet Sect from now on. I'll bring my master to find some treasures to help him condense his soul force. Yan Kuangtu said. Lu Ming nodded and said, I hope Senior Nine Sons can recover soon. As the three were talking, a young woman walked in. The woman was in her early 20s. She had an impressive figure and wore a red dress. She was very beautiful. Master, what can I do for you? The young woman glanced at Lu Ming and Yan Kuangtu curiously, then bowed to Bai Shijin. Qi Shui, you're here. Let me introduce you. This is Tianyun. He's new to the Talisman Puppet Sect and will cultivate in the Talisman Puppet Sect from now on. During this period, take care of him. Also, Tianyun will move into the Cloud Peak residence. Bai Shijin said to the young woman. What? You want him to move into the Cloud Peak residence? No, Master, I don't agree. I used to live there alone. The young woman immediately shouted with dissatisfaction. Why not? The Cloud Peak residence has the inscription eye, so it's easy to sense the inscription law. How can I let you monopolize such a good place? Tianyun must move there. If you don't agree, you can move out. Bai Shijin said with a sullen face. The young woman's face turned pale and she stopped talking. Her eyes were misty as she looked at Bai Shijin. Her master usually doted on her the most, but today, she was scolded because of an outsider, causing her to feel extremely wronged. Tianyun, this is my youngest disciple, Bai Qi Shui. She's been spoiled by me. Please get along with her in the future. Bai Shijin said with a smile. Greetings, Miss Bai. Lu Ming brought his fists together at Bai Qi Shui. Humph. Chapter 862. Qi Shui, what kind of attitude is this? Well, now, take Tianyun to Cloud Peak Residence and have a look around. Bai Shijin ordered. Bai Qi Shui stomped his feet. Without looking at Lu Ming, he pouted and turned to leave. Lu Ming touched his nose with a wry smile. He really wanted to suggest that Lu Ming arrange another residence for him. It would be more peaceful if he was alone. But thinking that Cloud Peak Residence was probably very special and was specially arranged by Bai Shijin, Lu Ming did not say anything. He said goodbye to Yan Kuangtu and Bai Shijin and followed Bai Qi Shui. After Lu Ming and Bai Qi Shui left, Yan Kuangtu looked at Bai Shijin with a faint smile and said, Bai Shijin, you are really an old fox. What are you planning to do by arranging such a beautiful disciple to live with Lu Ming? Ahem. Bai Shijin coughed a few times and said with a red face, Brother Yan, you think too much. Lu Ming is a genius. I just want my disciple to learn more from Lu Ming. As for the sparks between the young people, it's all up to fate. Ha ha ha. Bai Shijin laughed awkwardly. The conference hall was in the center of the Tai Chi Yin Yang fish. Lu Ming followed Bai Qi Shui out of the conference hall and walked in the direction of the Yin Yang fish. Along the way, Bai Qi Shui pouted and did not say a word. She did not even look at Lu Ming and flew forward. Lu Ming smiled wryly and could only follow her. The Yin and Yang mountain was very magnificent and covered a large area. There were countless mountains, lakes, and grotto heavens on top of it. The two flew for more than 100,000 miles, passing countless mountains and rivers along the way, and finally flew to a peak surrounded by clouds and mist. On top of the mountain peak, there was a courtyard that was built very exquisitely. This was Cloud Peak Residence. What a wonderful place. As soon as he landed on this mountain peak, Lu Ming's eyes brightened. Within his spiritual sea, he could feel the spiritual fire jumping about. It was as if it could easily sense the existence of the law of inscription. From the law of inscription, it could absorb the power of inscription and enhance his spiritual fire. Lu Ming sighed inwardly. The world was truly wondrous. There were all sorts of wondrous places. Some places had spiritual eyes, and the spiritual qi was extremely rich. In some places, there were Tao eyes that allowed one to comprehend the will of heaven and earth more clearly. But here, there was the eye of inscription, and it was easier to sense the inscription laws and absorb the power of inscription. No wonder Bai Shijin arranged for him to come here. He also hoped that he could improve faster before the War of Providence. Bai Qi Snow opened the door and walked in. Lu Ming also followed in. As soon as he entered, Lu Ming saw that there were some platforms in the courtyard. On the platforms, there were all kinds of materials. Lu Ming glanced at them and knew that they were materials for refining various runes and inscription symbol scrolls. It seemed like Bai Qi Snow often refined runes here. That room is yours. Bai Qi Snow pointed to a room on the left and spoke for the first time. Her voice was crisp and very pleasant to the ear. Yes. Lu Ming nodded. Also, let me tell you. The things in this courtyard are all materials for me to refine inscription symbol scrolls. You don't understand, so don't touch them. Do you understand? Bai Qi Snow looked at Lu Ming. In the Talisman Puppets sect, she had never seen Lu Ming. Among the geniuses of the Talisman Puppets sect, there was no such person as Lu Ming. She didn't know where her master found this person. She actually regarded him so highly and even allowed him to stay in the Cloud Peak residence. But in her heart, since he wasn't a genius of the Talisman Puppet sect, then his inscription Tao definitely wouldn't be good. She was really afraid that Lu Ming would destroy her materials and disturb her cultivation. Okay, I won't touch them. Lu Ming nodded. He couldn't be bothered to lower himself to the level of a little girl. Immediately after, Lu Ming looked around and walked into the room on the left and closed the door. I'm cultivating here alone and I'm so free. Master even arranged for someone to come in, and it's a man. I have to think of a way to make him unable to stay here and voluntarily leave. Bai Qi Snow looked at Lu Ming's door and her eyes spun. I got it. It's his first time here, so he definitely doesn't know anything. After that, I'll just ignore him. What did he ask me? I'll say I don't know and ignore him. Let's see how long he can stay here. Thinking of this, Bai Qi Snow's face revealed a smile and her mood became better. She began to study the inscription symbol scrolls in the courtyard. This place is really strange. My spirit fire is about to break through, let's try it out. Immediately, Lu Ming sat down cross-legged and activated the underworld god observation. Immediately, his mind seemed to pass through layers of voids and enter the inscription law. The surrounding inscription power was endless and very clear. It was as if Lu Ming could quickly absorb it with a thought. Immediately, he began to cultivate. Wisps of inscription power passed through layers of voids and fell into Lu Ming's sea of consciousness. They were absorbed by the spirit fire. Lu Ming's spirit fire slowly became more vigorous. In his sea of consciousness, 4 blue spirit lamps were burning fiercely and had reached the limit. He was only 1 step away from igniting 5. It's really strange. Compared to other places, the absorption of inscription power is dozens of times faster. Coupled with my underworld god observation, it's even more amazing. Lu Ming was shocked and worked even harder to cultivate. In the blink of an eye, a day and a night had passed. In his sea of consciousness, the flames of the 4 blue spirit lamps had reached the limit. Suddenly, a blue flame appeared in the 5th spirit lamp and jumped in the air. The 5th spirit lamp was lit. After a while, Lu Ming opened his eyes. 5 blue spirit lamps. Now, my spirit power is incomparably majestic. I wonder what level it has reached. Lu Ming pondered for a moment. Then, he waved his fingers and started to inscribe in the air. Inscriptions appeared and shone as if they were about to be inscribed in the air. In an instant, a formation was formed and embedded in the void, shining with a faint light. Unfortunately, after 10 breaths of time, the spirit formation collapsed. There's still a gap. My spirit power is still not enough to inscribe formations in the void. Perhaps, after igniting 1 or 2 more spirit lamps, I can inscribe formations in the void. Lu Ming thought to himself. If others knew about this, their jaws would drop. It was very difficult to inscribe formations in the void. One had to reach the 7th level of true inscription master, which was equivalent to the spirit embryo realm. Moreover, a true inscription master who had just broken through to the 7th level couldn't do it. Inscribing formations in the void couldn't stay for long. Only an expert among the 7th level inscription masters could do it. As for Lu Ming, he was only a 6th level inscription master. The formations he inscribed could already stay in the void for a short period of time. He believed that if his spirit power was stronger, he would really be able to inscribe formations in the void. This was extremely shocking. A 6th level inscription master could inscribe formations in the void. Since ancient times, not many people could do it. Once Lu Ming reached that level, his battle strength would increase rapidly and the restrictions of the path of inscription would be even fewer. With my current battle strength, I'm still far from being number 1 in the battle of providence. It's not realistic for me to rush up in a short period of time. The martial Tao and the path of inscription have to advance together and cooperate with each other to unleash a great power. Only then will I have a greater chance. The most important thing now is to raise the 9 dragons bloodline to the level of a god bloodline. The Talisman Puppet sect focuses on the path of inscription. I believe they have a lot of demonic beast blood essence. I'd better go buy some demonic beast blood essence first. Chapter 863. As soon as he walked out of the door, he saw Bai Qi Shui in the courtyard, concentrating on refining an inscription scroll. A piece of white paper made of a special material was spread out on the platform. Bai Qi Shui frowned, and a blue mental flame flickered on her fingertips. Some powdery materials were sucked into the air, and under Bai Qi Shui's fingers, they turned into lines of inscriptions and sank into the white paper. On the white paper, lines of inscriptions would appear, intertwining with each other, beautiful and gorgeous. 6th grade 7th layer Heavenly Fire Sword. Lu Ming could tell at a glance that Bai Qi Shui was refining a level 6 7th level Heavenly Fire Divine Sword Inscription Talisman Scroll. Once this Inscription Talisman Scroll was activated, it could release a Heavenly Fire Divine Sword. Its power was equivalent to the attack power of a level 7 Spiritual Sea Realm. Lu Ming was not in a hurry to leave. His figure silently appeared behind Bai Qi Shui, and he watched with interest. Bai Qi Shui's technique was very exquisite. The speed of inscription, and her control of the mental flame were also very exquisite. Her use of the mental flame has already reached the late stage of minute subtlety. As expected of Bai Shijin's disciple, amazing. Lu Ming praised in his heart. An inscription master's battle prowess was not only related to the strength of the mental flame, but also to the use of the mental flame. If one's use of the mental flame reached an extremely profound level, they could defeat the strong as the weak, just like in martial arts, surpassing levels to fight. The use of the mental flame was divided into 5 levels. Adept, Minute Subtlety, Heart Intent, and Shinha. Each level was divided into early, middle, late, and peak. Generally speaking, a 6th grade inscription master who could reach Minute Subtlety was already considered a genius. The 3rd level, Heart Intent, usually required a 7th grade inscription master to master. Intent manipulation required a level 8 inscription master to grasp it. As for Shinha, it required a level 9 emperor to grasp it. Bai Qi Shui was young, and to be able to master the mental flame to the late stage of minute subtlety was already very rare. She could be considered a peerless genius. Bai Qi Shui's fingers moved in the air like flowing water. Lines of inscriptions flew into the white paper. The Heavenly Fire Sword inscription scroll was about to be refined. Suddenly, a burst of green smoke came out of the scroll, and the entire scroll burst into flames, burning fiercely, and turned into ashes in the blink of an eye. Failed again, what's going on? Could it be that I can't inscribe a 6th grade 7th grade inscription scroll with my cultivation? Bai Qi Shui gritted her teeth, and frowned. At this moment, she noticed something strange behind her. She turned around and saw Lu Ming sizing her up. Ah! What are you doing? Bai Qi Shui was startled and almost jumped up like a frightened rabbit. I didn't do anything. I just happened to see you refining talismans, so I took a few more glances. Lu Ming smiled faintly. Look at me refining talismans. Can you understand it? You scared me. Don't hide behind me sneakily in the future, or I'll report you to Master. Bai Qi Shui patted her towering chest and glared at Lu Ming. Okay, I won't peek in the future. By the way, where can I buy materials, treasures, spiritual herbs and so on? Lu Ming asked. You want to buy things? I don't know. Bai Qi Shui rolled her eyes. You don't know? Lu Ming was stunned and said, then where did you get these materials? It's none of your business. Bai Qi Shui pouted. Lu Ming was a little amused. Bai Qi Shui was really a little girl. Was she deliberately making things difficult for him? I remember Senior Bai Shijin asked you to take care of me. You didn't even tell me this, so I can only send a message to Senior Bai. Lu Ming sighed. Wait a minute. Bai Qi Shui was shocked. If Lu Ming sent a message to Bai Shijin, she would probably be scolded again. These things can be bought in the treasure pavilion. Don't ask me where to go. I don't have time to take you there. Here is a map. Take it and see. Bai Qi Shui had no choice but to take out a map and give it to Lu Ming. At the same time, she cursed Lu Ming for not being a man and using her master to pressure her. Lu Ming opened the map and looked at it. Then he put it away and said with a smile, "Thank you, Miss Bai." With that, he walked toward the main entrance. When he reached the main entrance, Lu Ming seemed to have thought of something. He stopped in his tracks and said, "Miss Bai, when refining the Heavenly Fire Divine Sword Talisman, why don't you lighten the heat inscription on the 136th rune by 20% and increase the sharpness inscription on the 565th rune by 20%? Also, delay the use of the flint powder for 5 breaths." After that, Lu Ming strode out of the door and went towards the treasure pavilion. Bai Qi Xue Xue was stunned for a moment. Then she coldly snorted and muttered, "You don't know how to pretend to know." Nonsense. Refining the Heavenly Fire Divine Sword Charm Scroll, how can it be so easy? I just need to modify a few places. I'm just not skilled enough. If I continue to practice, I will definitely succeed. After muttering, Bai Qi Xue Xue continued to seriously inscribe the Heavenly Fire Divine Sword Charm Scroll. But then, she continued to inscribe 2 times in a row, both of which ended in failure. The talisman paper burned and turned into ashes. What's going on? Could it be that I really can't inscribe a 6th level 7th level inscription charm scroll? If I can't even inscribe a 6th level 7th level inscription charm scroll, I have no hope of getting an opportunity in the Battle of Destiny half a year later. Bai Qi Xue 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 frowned and was secretly angry. Why don't we try that guy's method? Lu Ming's words suddenly flashed in Bai Qi Xue Xue's mind. Then she shook her head and thought, that guy is probably talking nonsense. Why should I believe him? Although she thought so, Lu Ming's words still lingered in her mind. Damn guy, he deliberately disturbed my state of mind. I'll try it once. If it doesn't work, I'll report to Master and drive him out of Cloud Peak residence. Hey, yes, I'm so smart. At the thought of using this method to drive Lu Ming out of Cloud Peak residence, Bai Qi Xue Xue laughed happily again. She immediately took out a piece of talisman paper and began to inscribe the Heavenly Fire Sword Talisman Scroll. This time, she did the key points according to Lu Ming's method. Her fingers trembled slightly and inscriptions flew into the talisman paper. They intertwined on the talisman paper and formed a mysterious and beautiful pattern. Buzz! A moment later, when Bai Qi Xue finished inscribing the last inscription, the talisman paper shone brightly and there was a faint sound of a sword. A mysterious array was shining on the talisman paper. Did it succeed? Bai Qi Xue 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 Xue's eyes almost popped out. Her small mouth was wide open as she stared at the Heavenly Fire Sword Talisman Scroll in front of her. She actually succeeded. She never thought that according to Lu Ming's method, she would actually succeed and successfully refine the Heavenly Fire Sword Talisman Scroll. How was this possible? Could it be that this guy is a hidden expert? A thought flashed in Bai Qi Xue Xue Xue's mind. Then she quickly shook her head and muttered, "Impossible, I've seen all the geniuses of the Talisman Puppet sect. There's no such person. Outside of the Talisman Puppet sect, which youth's inscription technique can be compared to the geniuses of the Talisman Puppet sect? That guy must be lucky." He guessed right. Yes, he's lucky. Chapter 864. Lu Ming followed the map and flew towards the 100 Treasure Pavilion. Not long after, a huge building appeared in front of Lu Ming. That was the 100 Treasure Pavilion. There was a place for Talisman Puppet sect disciples to buy and sell treasures. Moreover, cultivating the path of inscription required more materials and treasures than cultivating martial arts. Therefore, the 100 Treasure Pavilion of the Talisman Puppet sect was very big and crowded. Lu Ming landed and walked towards the main hall. There were a lot of people in the main hall. There were many small rooms around the main hall, but there was a long queue. Lu Ming could only choose a room and started to line up. After half an hour, it was Lu Ming's turn. What do you need? Do you want to buy materials or sell materials? Lu Ming walked into a room. There was a counter in the room, and a beautiful young lady smiled at Lu Ming. I want to buy some demonic beast blood essence. Lu Ming said. Demonic beast blood essence, what grade and how much do you need? The young lady smiled and asked. There were many people coming to the Talisman Puppet sect to buy demonic beast blood essence every day, so it was nothing strange. Class 6 LV6 demonic beast blood essence, 50 sets. Class 7 LV6 demonic beast blood essence, 50 sets. Lu Ming thought for a moment and said. Class 6 LV6 and Class 7 LV6. The young lady was slightly stunned. Why? You don't have any? Lu Ming said. Yes, we don't have any in stock for this grade. You'll have to wait for a while. How about this, if you need it, you can pay a deposit in advance and come back when there's enough blood essence. What do you think? The young lady suggested. That's fine. How much is it? Lu Ming felt helpless. This was the only way. Class 6 LV6 demonic beast blood essence, 10 low-grade origin stones for 1 set. Class 7 LV6 demonic beast blood essence, 30 origin stones for 1 set. You can leave 500 origin stones as a deposit and come back 7 days later. What do you think? The young lady said. Lu Ming nodded and paid 500 origin stones as a deposit. At the same time, he sighed in his heart. The blood essence of demonic beasts was really expensive. If not for the large amount of resources left behind by Supreme Nine Yang, he would not have been able to afford it. After the battle in Jiolong City, the Temple of Paragon had been destroyed. However, the Nine Suns sovereign had kept all the treasures and things he had left in the Temple of Paragon into a spatial ring. Otherwise, Lu Ming would have suffered a huge loss. Miss, I'll buy another batch of talisman papers. Lu Ming thought for a moment. Since the Nine Dragons bloodline couldn't be improved for the time being, it would be better to buy a batch of symbol paper and inscribe some inscription scrolls. They would definitely be useful in the Battle of Destiny. It was said that there were many restrictions in the War of Providence. For example, inscription talisman scrolls, talismans, and other treasures could only be used to inscribe their own inscriptions. If they brought others' inscriptions, they would not be able to use them. Otherwise, if he brought a few 7th or 8th level inscription masters' inscription symbol scrolls, then there would be no need to compete. He would just sweep them all away. That would be meaningless. Only those inscribed by oneself could be considered one's own strength, and only then could one bring it in and use it. Immediately, Lu Ming bought 1,000 talisman papers of different levels and spent 100 origin stones. Relatively speaking, the talisman papers were much cheaper. After buying the talisman papers, Lu Ming left the 100 Treasure Pavilion and returned to Cloud Peak residence. As soon as he walked in, he saw Bai Qi Shui sitting there in a daze. When she saw Lu Ming return, Bai Qi Shui's eyes lit up. She carefully sized up Lu Ming. She looked left and right, up and down. In the end, Lu Ming was a little embarrassed. Ahem, Miss Bai, what are you looking at? I've only left for a while. Don't tell me you miss me already? Lu Ming coughed a few times and laughed. Miss you? You wish. Let me ask you, how did you know that the Heavenly Fire Sword symbol scroll needed to be modified like that? Bai Qi Shui glared at Lu Ming and snorted coldly. You succeeded in refining it? I thought you wouldn't do it according to my method. Lu Ming said with a smile that was not a smile. Humph, I was just casually trying. I was lucky to succeed. You haven't said how you knew? Bai Qi Shui asked, emphasizing the word lucky. Lu Ming laughed in his heart. This little girl really cared about her face. Then he smiled and said, actually, I guessed blindly. Guessed? Humph, as expected. Bai Qi Shui pouted and revealed an as expected expression. Lu Ming was a little confused. Bai Qi Shui believed him. All right, don't touch the things here. I'll go out and buy some things. After saying that, Bai Qi Shui ran out like a snowstorm. I'll also inscribe a batch of inscription talisman scrolls. Lu Ming waved his hand and a piece of snow-white talisman paper was spread out on the platform. His fingers danced in the air as he began to inscribe inscriptions. The talisman Lu Ming wanted to inscribe was called the Fire Prison Talisman. It was a Class 8 Level 6 trapping talisman. To be honest, this was Lu Ming's first time inscribing a talisman. However, his mind was filled with all sorts of knowledge about inscriptions from Lian Song. As Lu Ming's fingers moved, the knowledge slowly came into play. 10 minutes later, a fire prison talisman was successfully inscribed. 10 minutes? Too slow, continue. Lu Ming frowned. He felt that it was still too slow. If others knew about this, they would be so angry that they would vomit blood. It had to be known that this was a 6th level 8th layer inscription symbol scroll. Not only that, but this was the first time that Lu Ming had inscribed an inscription symbol scroll. It had only taken him 10 minutes, which was a terrifying speed. However, Lu Ming was still not satisfied. For the second talisman, his speed was slightly faster. It only took him 9 minutes. As he continued to inscribe, the knowledge and experience in his mind began to integrate with the actual operation. Lu Ming's inscription speed became faster and faster. Moreover, Lu Ming did not need any materials to inscribe inscriptions. This was because his flame of vigor was extremely strong. He could just use it as a substitute. 2 hours later, Lu Ming inscribed a fire prison talisman. It only took him 3 minutes. If this speed was known to others, it would scare them to death. My mastery of the flame of vigor is still not high. It's only at the peak of refinement. This needs to be honed. Lu Ming thought to himself. His biggest advantage was the strength of his flame of vigor. Every level was perfect. Moreover, he had Lian Song's cultivation experience. Therefore, his inscription speed was terrifying. However, he also knew that inscribing the fire prison talisman in 3 minutes was his limit. If he wanted to break through, he had to break through the realm of the flame of vigor. In fact, he had not been practicing inscription for long. His mastery of the flame of vigor had reached the peak of refinement. This was already a terrifying feat. Bai Qi Shui was extremely talented. She had practiced for more than 10 years, but she was only at the late stage of refinement. Even Dandan had sighed at Lu Ming's terrifying inscription talent. However, Lu Ming was not satisfied. What he needed to do was not something that others could compare to. Therefore, he had to do it better than others. Next, he continued to inscribe symbols. This time, he inscribed a 6th level 9th layer talisman, the 9-sword array talisman. Chapter 865. Lu Ming concentrated, his fingers constantly waving, and inscriptions flew into the talisman paper. A 6th level 9th layer talisman was 10 times more complex than a 6th level 8th layer talisman, and the time it took was naturally longer. This time, Lu Ming spent a full hour and a half to successfully inscribe. At the moment of successful inscription, Lu Ming could clearly feel that in the unseen world, the law of inscription descended a trace of power of inscription, fusing into Lu Ming's spiritual fire and strengthening it. Refining a 6th level 9th layer talisman, the power of inscription descending from the law of inscription is more than 10 times stronger than refining a 6th level 8th layer talisman. Lu Ming's mouth revealed a trace of a smile, and he continued to refine. As Lu Ming continued to refine, his inscription speed also became faster and faster. Just as Lu Ming was concentrating on inscription, Bai Qi Shui had returned to Cloud Peak residence at some unknown time. This guy is inscribing a talisman? Humph, what kind of high-grade talisman can this guy inscribe? Hey, no, this is a 6th level 9th layer talisman, a 9th level sword array talisman. Bai Qi Shui was quite disdainful at first, and casually glanced at it a few times, but after a glance, her eyes could no longer move away. She stared straight at Lu Ming, watching Lu Ming's fingers constantly waving in the air, and her mouth opened so wide that she could swallow a duck egg. She could see that Lu Ming was actually inscribing a 6th level 9th layer talisman. A 6th level 9th layer talisman was already a top 6th level talisman. Lu Ming's path of inscription had actually reached this level. It had to be known that she had only succeeded in inscribing a 6th-level 7th-layer talisman for the first time under Lu Ming's guidance. Bai Qi Shui stared blankly, and the more she looked, the more shocked she was. The usage of spiritual flames is at the peak of the minute's subtlety realm. Also, how can his spiritual energy be so terrifying? He doesn't even need to use materials. Wait, how can his technique be so exquisite? How can his speed be so fast? Bai Qi mumbled in a daze. The astonishment and disbelief in his eyes grew thicker. Night fell, but Lu Ming did not seem to be tired. After he finished inscribing one talisman, he immediately started inscribing the next one. His speed was getting faster and faster. Later on, it only took him half an hour to inscribe a level 6 9th-tier talisman scroll. In one breath, Lu Ming engraved 15 pieces of paper before he stopped and let out a long sigh. At this moment, he felt that his spiritual power was somewhat lacking. His spiritual flame was somewhat dim, and he needed to rest to recover. Miss Bai, you're back. At this time, Lu Ming discovered Bai Qi Snow. Pervert. Bai Qi stared blankly at Lu Ming and blurted out a few words. You met a pervert? Where is it? Lu Ming's eyes darted around. You're a pervert. Bai Qi Snow muttered. Me? Lu Ming was speechless. Who exactly are you? The Tao of inscription is actually so powerful? Bai Qi Snow opened her eyes wide and swept her gaze over Lu Ming's body. I'm Tianyun. Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that this thick-skinned girl saw something? I know all the geniuses of the talisman puppet sect. Why have I never seen someone like you? Could it be? As she spoke, Bai Qi Snow circled around Lu Ming and sized him up carefully. Could it be that you're a genius that Master secretly nurtured? Or are you Master's illegitimate son? Yes, it must be so. No wonder he asked you to stay in the Cloud Peak residence. Bai Qi Snow became more and more excited as she spoke. Her eyes were shining as if she had discovered a huge secret. Lu Ming's forehead was full of black lines. Isn't this girl's imagination a little too rich? Miss Bai, I'm not secretly nurtured by your master, nor am I his illegitimate son. I just came to the talisman puppet sect not long ago. Lu Ming explained helplessly. You're not. That's impossible. Bai Qi Snow rubbed her chin as her large eyes blinked. Then her eyeballs spun around. No one knew what she was thinking. After a while, Bai Qi Snow's face revealed an indescribable smile, causing Lu Ming's heart to tighten. He didn't know what this girl was thinking. Tianyun, I suddenly realized that you're not bad. How about this? I won't object to you staying in the Cloud Peak residence in the future. But I have a condition. You have to teach me the Tao of inscription. I realize that some of your techniques are even more exquisite than my master's. Yes, it's decided. You can rest today and teach me tomorrow. Bai Qi Snow grinned as she finished speaking and ran back to her room. Leaving behind Lu Ming in a daze, he roared in his heart, I haven't agreed yet. Just like this, as a condition of staying in the Cloud Peak residence, Lu Ming took out 2 hours every day to guide Bai Qi Snow in her cultivation of the Tao of inscription. Lu Ming's Tao of inscription was inherited from Lian Song. How experienced and insightful was his vision. He was often able to point out Bai Qi Snow's flaws and point out the main points in one sentence. In a short 2 days, Bai Qi Snow's understanding of the Tao of inscription had deepened by a level. At the same time, Lu Ming became more and more unfathomable in her heart. Tianyun, I'll bring you out for a walk today. You haven't taken a good look around the talisman puppet sect, right? There are many good places in the talisman puppet sect. On the morning of the 3rd day, Bai Qi Snow pulled Lu Ming and ran out. Lu Ming was also rather curious as he followed Bai Qi Snow. Along the way, they saw many strange places. Some had beautiful sceneries, some were mysterious and profound, and it broadened Lu Ming's horizons. A mountain peak appeared in front of them. At the foot of the mountain, there was an enormous cave that they saw people entering and exiting. That's the Myriad Formation Cave. There are countless formations in the cave that were inscribed by the experts of the Talisman Puppet sect. Some are incomplete formations, some are complete and can be comprehended by future generations. Come, let's go take a look. Bai Chi Snow explained. After which, the two of them landed at the entrance of the cave. There were people guarding the entrance of the cave. However, Bai Chi Snow's identity was no small matter. She was the little disciple of the Talisman Faction's master, Bai Shijin. Naturally, she could enter without any obstructions. As soon as he entered the cave, Lu Ming felt a complicated aura pervading the air. Lu Ming swept his gaze and realized that the walls on both sides of the cave were inscribed with formation diagrams. There were various kinds of formation diagrams that emitted different auras. At a glance, the cave was endlessly deep and stretched into the distance. There were countless formation diagrams on both sides of the cave. Lu Ming observed carefully. He recognized some of the formation diagrams, but he didn't recognize most of them. Moreover, there was a detailed explanation below every formation diagram. There were even some incomplete formations that were incomparably mysterious and left for future generations to comprehend and decipher. Below, there were also some insights. Good place, this is truly a good place. Lu Ming looked at more than 10 formation diagrams and felt that he had gained a lot. This myriad formation cave was simply an endless wealth left behind by the ancestors of the Talisman Puppet sect. Lu Ming walked forward as he observed. Suddenly, he realized that there was a fork at the side of the cave. He walked in and there was only one formation diagram in the fork. Buzz! When he saw the formation diagram, the heavens and earth trembled. He discovered that his surroundings had changed. He was now in a boundless void, and in the void, there were 8 streams of sword chi. The sword chi was incomparably gigantic, like pillars that supported the heavens. They descended from the heavens, suppressing everything in all directions and destroying everything. The powerful sword intense slashed in Lu Ming's direction with a terrifying might, just like when he had faced Martial Dominator DE at 9 Dragon City. Shit! Chapter 866. Bam! Bam! In the next moment, his surroundings changed. He was still in the fork. He retreated and hit the wall behind him. His back was drenched in cold sweat, and he was gasping for breath. What a powerful array diagram! Lu Ming was shocked and did not dare to look at the array diagram again. Tianyun, are you okay? Why did you go to look at the array diagram? It was carved by a supreme martial artist imitating a level 9 array diagram. Only a level 8 inscriber can look at it. At the fork, Bai Chi Shui looked at Lu Ming with a worried expression. Why didn't I see a level 9 array diagram? Lu Ming was depressed. With his current cultivation, looking at a level 9 array diagram was like looking for trouble. It was good enough that he was not injured. Isn't it written here? Bai Chi Shui pointed at the side of the fork. There was a jade token there with the words, "Only a level 8 inscriber can enter," written on it. Lu Ming smiled bitterly. He was too focused just now and did not notice it. This is a good place. If you have time later, you can come here to comprehend it. Lu Ming said with a smile as he walked out of the fork. The two of them walked around for a while and then left. They planned to walk around other places. However, as soon as they walked out of the cave of 1,000 formations, they were blocked by a few people. There were 3 young men. The leader was a young man with a hooked nose. His eyes flashed with sharpness from time to time. Su Shan, what are you doing? Get out of my way. Bai Chi Shui's face darkened when she saw the young man and shouted. Bai Chi Shui, what are you shouting for? What right do you have to scold me? Humph, what a slut. My brother is pursuing you, but you are hiding a wild man in Cloud Peak residence. Su Shan sneered and looked at Lu Ming. In the past few days, the news of a young man living in Cloud Peak residence had spread and caused a great uproar among the young disciples. Bai Qishue, the youngest disciple of the leader of the Talisman faction, Bai Shijin. Not only did she have a noble status, but she also possessed an outstanding beauty. In the Talisman puppet sect, countless geniuses and geniuses were pursuing her, but none of them were able to catch Bai Qishue's attention. Bai Qishue did not even like the supreme talents on the list of top 1,000 talents. But now, a young man was living in Cloud Peak residence, which was regarded as a sacred place in the eyes of many male disciples. How could this not be shocking? Countless people were eager to find trouble with Lu Ming. Su Shan did not expect to bump into Bai Qishue here. He immediately stopped the two of them. What did you say? Bai Qishue was so angry that his face turned red, and he glared at Su Shan. Am I wrong? Su Shan snorted coldly. He then looked at Lu Ming and said, Lad, are you the one staying in Yinfeng residence? That's right. Lu Ming frowned and said. Young man, I advise you to get out of Cloud Peak residence. Otherwise, one day, your legs will be broken. Su Shan sneered and jealousy flashed in his eyes. Where did this young man come from? How could he live in Cloud Peak residence? Not only did Cloud Peak residence have the inscribed eye, but it was also a sacred place to cultivate the spiritual fire. At the same time, a beauty like Bai Qishue lived with him. How could he not be jealous? I advise you to keep your mouth clean. Otherwise, one day, your face will be swollen. Lu Ming smiled faintly and replied. By the side, Bai Qishue burst out laughing. Lu Ming was using Su Shan's words to retaliate against him. Su Shan's face darkened and a sharp look flashed in his eyes. Young man, I don't know when my face will be swollen, but today, your legs will be broken. Su Shan said coldly. He waved his hand and a huge black bear appeared on the ground. It wasn't a real black bear, but a puppet. Its eyes emitted a cold light, and the moment it appeared, it let out a shocking roar. It was a puppet that was equivalent to the 6th layer of the spiritual ocean tier. At this moment, other people heard the commotion and came over. That's Su Shan and Bai Qishue. I heard that a strange man lived in Cloud Peak residence recently. Could it be that young man, Su Shan's elder brother? He has been chasing after Bai Qishue. No wonder Su Shan would find trouble with that person. There's a good show to watch. That young man came from who knows where. He can live in Cloud Peak residence. He will be tortured sooner or later. It must be Bai Qishue's request. Otherwise, normal people wouldn't be able to live there. This young man doesn't know his place. If it were me, even if I had the chance, would take the initiative to move out. Who knows how many people I would offend. Around them, some people were discussing in low voices. Su Shan, what are you doing? If you want to fight, I'll keep you company. Bai Qishue stepped out and stood in front of Lu Ming, glaring at Su Shan. Bai Qishue, it seems that this person is really your little lover. You're protecting him like this. Su Shan sneered. Bai Qishue blushed and said, nonsense. Tianyun and I are just friends. Friends? Hee hee. Su Shan sneered and looked at Lu Ming, shouting, brat, hiding behind a woman, what kind of man are you? If you have the guts, fight with me. Roar. The black bear puppet roared, emitting a violent aura. Since you're looking for a beating, I'll fulfill your wish. Lu Ming smiled faintly and stepped forward, passing by Bai Qishue. Brat, watch me break your legs. Su Shan's face revealed a ferocious expression. His forehead glowed, and the black bear puppet roared angrily. It stomped on the ground and pounced at Lu Ming. Lu Ming swung his palm. Boom! The palm landed on the black bear puppet and sent it flying 1,000 meters away. It heavily smashed into the ground and turned into a pile of scrap metal. The scene instantly quieted down. A puppet that was equivalent to the 6th layer of the spiritual ocean realm was made of metal and was invulnerable. But now, it was actually turned into scrap metal by Lu Ming's palm, which shocked everyone. Martial Dao, how is your martial Dao so strong? Su Shan reacted and shouted angrily. The talisman puppet sect mainly cultivated the Dao of inscription. They also cultivated martial Dao, but it was only auxiliary and wouldn't have a deep level. Lu Ming's martial Dao was actually so strong, which was rare in the talisman puppet sect. Of course, in the talisman puppet sect, there were some geniuses who were naturally suited to cultivate martial Dao. They would also choose to cultivate martial Dao, but there were very few of them. In fact, in the talisman puppet sect, those who mainly cultivated martial Dao would be looked down upon. You're looking for a beating. Lu Ming strode forward. Using martial Dao to cripple one of my puppets, what kind of ability is that? If you have the ability, then use the Dao of inscription to fight with me. Su Shan roared angrily and retreated. With a wave of his hand, 3 puppets appeared on the ground. They were all at the 6th layer of the spiritual ocean realm. Using the Dao of inscription? Sure. Lu Ming moved his hand and an inscription scroll appeared. He opened it and poured in his spirit fire. The inscription scroll emitted a brilliant light and 9 battle swords floated out. Ah, 6th layer 9th layer inscription scroll, 9 sword array scroll. You cheated, you cheated. Su Shan shouted. Xiao! Xiao! The 9 battle swords danced and cut the 3 puppets into pieces. Chapter 867. The crisp sound of the slap spread far and wide outside the 10,000 formation cave. Then, Su Shan's pitiful cries could be heard. Pa! Then, Lu Ming turned his hand and slapped Su Shan again. Su Shan was sent flying and heavily fell to the ground. Both sides of his face were swollen, and he was beyond recognition. The surrounding onlookers were stunned, including Bai Qi and Shui. Compared to martial artists, a duel between inscription masters was not as violent. There were very few people who would directly go on stage and slap others. This was the first time they had seen such a scene. You dare hit young Master Su? You're finished, you're finished. One of the youths who came with Su Shan pointed at Lu Ming and shouted. Lu Ming's hand moved and a 9 extreme sword array appeared in his hand. He stared at the 2 youths and said, What? Do you want to try? You're despicable. You're cheating. You didn't use an inscription scroll that you refined yourself. What kind of skill is that? One of the youths shouted. When he saw the inscription scroll in Lu Ming's hand, he retreated again and again. Liao Tsang was deathly pale. They didn't think that Lu Ming would have such a high-level inscription scroll in his hands. They also didn't think that Lu Ming would be so shameless to use such an inscription scroll. They believed that such a high-level inscription scroll must have been bought by Lu Ming. It was impossible for him to refine it himself. There was an unwritten rule between inscription masters. In a fair duel between 2 inscription masters, one could not use an inscription scroll refined by another. That would not be a competition of strength, but a competition of wealth. Only in a life and death battle would one use it. Moreover, wanting to activate a high-level inscription scroll was not a simple matter. Who said I didn't refine it myself? Lu Ming curled his lips. This was clearly something that he had refined himself. You're shameless. Let's go. One of the youths said. Then, he helped the dizzy Su Shan up and hurriedly left. The surrounding onlookers also shook their heads and looked at Lu Ming with disdain. They didn't believe that Lu Ming, this kid who had come out of nowhere, would be able to refine a 6th level 9th level inscription symbol scroll. Youths who could refine level 6 level 9 inscriptions were the top 300 geniuses on the list of top 1,000 talents. They were as famous as the martial arts geniuses who had awakened the god-level bloodline. How could this unknown brat be a god-tier prodigy? Moreover, Lu Ming's martial arts were obviously not weak. Smashing a puppet at the 6th layer of the spiritual ocean tier into a pile of scrap metal with one slap, He obviously had high attainments in martial arts. Since the martial way was so profound, then it was impossible for the way of inscription to be so strong. If one were to say that Lu Ming was so strong in both aspects, then they wouldn't believe it even if they were beaten to death. Let's go. Lu Ming was disinclined to pay attention to the gazes of the surrounding people. He called out to Bai Qi and Snow, and then flew forward. Bai Qi Snow blinked her big eyes and followed him. Tianyun, I didn't expect your martial cultivation to be so powerful. You can shatter a class 6 LV6 puppet with a single slap. What level has your martial cultivation reached? Are you practicing both martial arts and inscription? Along the way, Bai Qi Snow was extremely curious and asked several questions in a whisper. Lu Ming smiled bitterly and hurried on, too lazy to answer. Tianyun, Su Shan's elder brother, is a god-tier prodigy, ranked 299th on the list of top 1,000 talents. This time, you beat Su Shan, so his elder brother, the rising sun, may cause trouble for you. You have to be careful. Bai Qi Snow reminded him. Oh, is that so? Lu Ming nodded casually. After that, the two of them didn't go anywhere else and directly returned to Cloud Peak residence. In the blink of an eye, another 3 days passed. On this day, Lu Ming was inscribing inscriptions in the yard. After a few days of inscribing practice, Lu Ming's inscribing speed had become faster. It only took 20 minutes to inscribe a talisman scroll of the 9-level sword array. This speed was extremely amazing. If it were to spread out, it would scare a group of people to death. Beside him, Bai Qi Snow opened her eyes wide and stared at it without blinking, trying to extract what she needed from it. Before long, Lu Ming had inscribed another talisman scroll. Tianyun, with your inscribing speed and 100% success rate, even if you don't do anything else, you will make a fortune just by selling inscription talismans. Bai Qi Snow said with her eyes shining. How could others inscribe inscription talismans so fast? Moreover, they would fail and waste materials. Unlike Lu Ming, who didn't want any materials and only used talisman paper. With a 100% success rate, it would be strange if he didn't make a fortune. Lu Ming nodded. This was a good way to make money. In the future, when he lacked raw stones, he could consider refining inscription talismans to sell. The two of them chatted. From time to time, Lu Ming would guide Bai Qi Snow in refining. Hundreds of thousands of miles away from Cloud Peak residence, there was another mountain peak. On the mountain peak, there was also a courtyard. This courtyard was the courtyard of the god-level genius Rising Sunday. In the courtyard, Su Shan was crying in front of the rising sun. Big brother, you finally came out of seclusion. You must avenge me. That Tianyun is simply lawless and arrogant. Su Shan shouted. You mean that kid called Tianyun lives in Cloud Peak residence? The rising sun coldly said. His eyes were filled with killing intent and thick jealousy. Yes, big brother. I was fighting injustice for you, so I went to find that kid Tianyun to get the hell out of Cloud Peak residence. I didn't expect that he would use a 6th level 9th layer inscription talisman to plot against me. Big brother, you must avenge me. Su Shan cried out pitifully and miserably. Don't worry. That guy actually dared to live in Cloud Peak residence. I will break his legs and make him get the hell out of Cloud Peak residence. The rising sun said. Dong. At this moment, a melodious bell sounded. This bell sound came from the center of the talisman puppet sect. It seemed to be able to cross the endless space and spread throughout the entire Twin Forms mountain region. This is the signal bell. When the signal bell rings, it means that the sect has something important to report. Su Shan and the rising sun's expressions changed. Then, the two of them each took out a voice transmission jade talisman. When the signal bell rang, the sect would report something important to each disciple's voice transmission jade talisman. When the two of them saw the content of the voice transmission jade talisman, their expressions changed drastically. How is this possible? How is this possible? How can that Tianyun become a Zongzi candidate? Su Shan screamed in disbelief. The content of the voice transmission Jade Talisman was the news that the upper echelon of the Talisman Puppet sect wanted Tianyun to be promoted to a Zongzi candidate. Tianyun, the Tianyun who lived in Cloud Peak residence. The rising sun also widened his eyes in disbelief. That's right, it's him. How is this possible? How is this possible? Su Shan was still in disbelief. It was extremely difficult to become a Zongzi candidate. One had to obtain the approval of more than 60% of the founding elders of the Talisman faction and the Puppet faction before they could ascend to the throne of a Zongzi candidate. In the future, they would have a chance to compete for the position of Zongzi and eventually take charge of the Talisman Puppet sect. Chapter 868. Damn it, who is this Tianyun? How is he qualified to be a Zongzi candidate? Damn it! Rising Sun yelled. It was Rising Sun's dream to become a Zongzi candidate. He had been working hard for it, but now it was taken by a stranger. He was so jealous that he was about to go crazy. At this moment, the entire Talisman Puppet sect was confused. Who is Tianyun? Where did he come from? How is he qualified to be a Zongzi candidate? The elite's eyes lit up. Especially those who were ranked in the top 300 of the list of top 1,000 talents. They were all competing for the Zongzi candidate, but now it was taken by a stranger. How could they be convinced? I'd like to see how capable this Tianyun is to become a Zongzi candidate. Go and find out more about this Tianyun. Everyone in Liangyi Mountain was shocked by the name, Tianyun. In Yun Peak residence, Bai Qi stared blankly at the voice transmission Jade Talisman in his hand, then stared at Lu Ming for a long time before he said, "You still say that you're not Master's illegitimate son, but now you're a Zongzi candidate." Lu Ming was speechless. What is this? Don't tell me everyone has been notified? Lu Ming asked. More or less. Almost all the Talisman Puppet sect disciples in Liangyi Mountain have received the news. Bai Qi said. Lu Ming smiled bitterly and touched his nose. Is there a need to make such a big fuss? Lu Ming knew that there would be a lot of trouble in this way. These guys are deliberately making trouble for me. Lu Ming sighed in his heart. He understood that Bai Shijin, Du Songjue, and the others were doing this on purpose. It was equivalent to indirectly challenging him. He was a stranger who had appeared out of nowhere, and was appointed as a Zongzi candidate. How could those prodigies be convinced? They would definitely cause trouble for him. This was the test. Forget it, I'll deal with it as it comes. At most, I'll go into seclusion and not come out. Lu Ming felt a headache coming on. He was not afraid of those people, but he was afraid of trouble. Hey, you haven't answered me. Are you Master's illegitimate son or not? Bai Qi's eyes widened, and he continued to ask curiously. Lu Ming was speechless. Stop guessing, I didn't cultivate in the Talisman Puppet sect. You didn't cultivate in the Talisman Puppet sect? Then where did you cultivate? In the territory of Emperor's territory? Bai Qi asked curiously. Something like that. Lu Ming said casually. Really? Are you really cultivating in the territory of the Emperor Heavenly Divine Palace? Do you know Lu? Bai Qixue became excited and asked a few questions. No. Lu Ming's heart jumped and he hurriedly denied it. You don't know Lu Ming? Humph, you're so ignorant. You don't even know Lu Ming. In the Battle of Nine Dragon City, Lu Ming pulled out the divine Nine Dragon Cauldron and fought against 3 supreme martial artists. It was said that one of the supreme martial artists was almost killed by him. Even Martial Emperor De took action. How can you not know such a person? He's my idol now. Bai Qi looked at Lu Ming with disdain, and then looked at the sky with a smitten look. Lu Ming was confused. Lu Ming is a peerless genius in my heart. He's comparable to the top 10 on the list of top 1,000 talents. Those people like the rising sun are far from him. Tianyun, although you're good, you're still far behind Lu Ming. Keep working hard. Bai Qi patted Lu Ming on the shoulder with a look of encouragement. I'll work hard, work hard. Lu Ming's face was covered in cold sweat. At this moment, a talisman puppet sect elder arrived, and Lu Ming heaved a sigh of relief. The elder was here to give Lu Ming the token that represented the candidate Zongzi. With this token, Lu Ming could enter most places in the talisman puppet sect at will, except for some important forbidden areas. In the next 2 days, Liangyi Mountain was very lively. Everyone was talking about Tianyun. However, no one dared to cause trouble for Lu Ming. They seemed to be waiting for someone else to go first and test the waters. 2 days later, Lu Ming left Cloud Peak residence and headed to Treasure Pavilion. 7 days had passed, and he went to collect the blood essence of the demonic beasts. Tianyun, that's Tianyun. Lu Ming was recognized as soon as he arrived at Treasure Pavilion. He's Tianyun? He's so young. What does he have to be a candidate Zongzi? You don't know? But he must be outstanding in some way. Otherwise, why would the elders agree? I think he might be a disciple secretly groomed by one of the elders. He only appeared now that the Battle of Providence is about to begin. That's possible. There was a lot of discussion in the surroundings. Many people looked at Lu Ming curiously. Some of them were kind, but most of them were jealous. Lu Ming simply ignored these gazes and went to the counter that he had visited previously. Young master, you're Tianyun? The young lady at the counter widened her eyes and looked at Lu Ming curiously. If there's no one else, it's me. Pretty lady, have you collected the blood essence of the demonic beasts? Lu Ming asked. Yes, they're all here. Take a look. The young lady handed a storage ring to Lu Ming. Lu Ming took it and scanned it with his mind to confirm that it was correct. Then, Lu Ming paid 2,500 origin stones, put away the blood essence of the demonic beasts, and walked out. Tianyun, stop. A cold shout sounded, and 2 figures blocked Lu Ming's way. Su Shan. Lu Ming saw at a glance that one of them was Su Shan. The other person looked somewhat similar to Su Shan. His eyes shone with sharpness. It's the rising sun. It seems that the rising sun can't help but make the first move. Of course, all the elites are watching. Someone must make the first move. Su Shan was beaten by Tianyun a few days ago, and the rising sun has been pursuing Bai Qi Shui. It's reasonable for him to make the first move. Finally, I can see what's so special about this Tianyun. In the 100 Treasure Pavilion, there was a lot of discussion. Everyone looked at Lu Ming with bright eyes. So this is the rising sun. Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat. Tianyun, you finally dare to appear. Let's see where you can go today. Su Shan said coldly, staring at Lu Ming fiercely. That day, he was slapped twice by Lu Ming in public, and now he had become a joke. He hated Lu Ming to the core. What's wrong? Do you want your face to be swollen again? Lu Ming glanced at Su Shan, causing Su Shan's face to change, and he took a step back. Tianyun, I want to see what ability you have. How dare you hit my brother, move into Yunfeng residence, and become a Zongzi candidate. The rising sun stepped out. A blue light shone between his eyebrows, and a huge mental strength spread out. Do you want your face to be swollen too? Lu Ming looked at the rising sun. This made the rising sun's face turn ugly. An even more violent mental strength spread out from between his eyebrows, stirring up a mental strength storm in the hall. No fighting is allowed in the 100 Treasure Pavilion. Chapter 869. In the 100 Treasure Pavilion, an expert warned. Rising Sun's expression changed and he quickly withdrew his mental strength. Tianyun, if you have the ability, go to the inscription battle arena and have a fair battle with me. Rising Sun stared at Lu Ming. The inscription battle arena was the place where the disciples of the talisman puppet sect competed. Not interested. Lu Ming said and strode away. During this period, the Nine Dragons' bloodline had been weak. Lu Ming was worried that there would be repercussions and had long wanted to try devouring the blood essence. Now that he had finally obtained the blood essence, he couldn't wait to go back and test it out. How could he be in the mood to compete on the inscription battle arena? If he could deal with it here, he wouldn't mind doing it. Lu Ming left the 100 Treasure Pavilion and flew directly to Cloud Peak residence. He's just a coward. What right does he have to become a Zongzi candidate? Rising Sun snorted when he saw Lu Ming leaving. Who knows how Tianyun managed to become a Zongzi candidate? He's clearly afraid of you, big brother, and doesn't dare to fight with you. Once you do, he'll give himself away. Su Shan sneered. In the main hall of the 100 Treasure Pavilion, others also shook their heads. They thought that Lu Ming didn't dare to compete with Rising Sunday. And such rumors spread throughout the Yinyang Mountain through the 100 Treasure Pavilion. After Lu Ming returned to Cloud Peak residence, he went straight to his room and sat down cross-legged. A jade bottle appeared in his hand. There were 9 pearl-like drops of demonic beast blood essence in it. Grade 6 LV6 demonic beast blood essence. With a thought, the 9 dragons' bloodline emerged. 9 silver chakras appeared around the 9 dragons' bloodline. However, the light was dim and the 9 dragons' bloodline seemed to be weak. Lu Ming controlled the 9 dragons' bloodline and sucked the 9 drops of demonic beast blood essence into his mouth. He began to refine them. Slowly, as the power of the beast's blood was absorbed by the 9 dragons' bloodline, the 9 silver chakras became brighter and brighter. 2 hours later, the first blood essence was refined. Lu Ming took out a Class 6 LV6 demonic beast's blood essence and refined it. In the blink of an eye, a day had passed. Lu Ming continuously refined more than 10 portions of the blood essence of the demonic beasts. Finally, the 9 dragons' bloodline regained its vigor. The 9 silver chakras shone brightly and the speed of refining the blood essence also increased by a notch. Lu Ming continued refining. In the blink of an eye, another 3 days passed. In 4 days, Lu Ming had refined all 56th level grade blood essences, but his 9 dragons' bloodline still hadn't reached the divine grade. What's going on? 50 blood essences of 6th level beasts are not enough for me to level up. I was able to reach the god realm before I devoured so much blood essences. But now, I've already devoured more blood essences than before. Why haven't I leveled up yet? Lu Ming furrowed his brows. He was worried that the 9 dragons' bloodline wouldn't level up because of the explosion of the chakras. That would be a great loss. Impossible. It must be because I haven't devoured enough blood essence. Keep devouring. Lu Ming gritted his teeth, took out a Class 7 LV6 demonic beast's blood essence, and continued to devour and refine it. The blood essence of a Class 7 LV6 demonic beast was 4 or 5 times thicker than that of a Class 6 LV6 demonic beast. Lu Ming continued to devour the blood essence. Lu Ming was so focused on refining the blood essence that he was oblivious to what was going on outside. In the past few days, Tianyun's name had spread like wildfire in Liangyi Mountain. On the second day of Lu Ming's closed-door cultivation, other geniuses ranked in the top 300 on the list of top 1,000 talents challenged Lu Ming. However, Lu Ming didn't accept the challenge. Subsequently, rumors about Lu Ming not daring to accept the challenge and that he was weak spread like wildfire. Some geniuses even went to Cloud Peak residence to challenge Lu Ming. However, Bai Qi Shui used the excuse that Lu Ming was in closed-door cultivation to activate the formation of Cloud Peak residence and turned Lu Ming away. Thus, the rumors that Lu Ming was cowardly and incompetent became even louder. Some people even suggested to the Elder Council that Lu Ming be stripped of his position as Zongzi candidate and move out of Cloud Peak residence. However, the suggestion was rejected. Many geniuses gritted their teeth and waited for Lu Ming to appear and defeat Lu Ming in public. Then, they would see if Lu Ming would still have the face to continue being a Zongzi candidate. Time passed day by day. In the blink of an eye, Lu Ming had been in closed-door cultivation for 7 days. Lu Ming had refined 10 more Class 7 LV6 blood essences. At this time, Lu Ming finally felt that the Nine Dragons bloodline was about to evolve. This time, the amount of blood essence consumed is several times more than the previous time. Is this the after effect? However, as long as it can evolve, it's worth it. No matter how much blood essence is consumed, it's worth it. A smile appeared on Lu Ming's face. However, evolving the divine bloodline will cause too much of a commotion. I have to find a secret place to do so. I'll ask Bai Qi Shui if there's a secret place. Thinking of this, Lu Ming went out of the room and saw Bai Qi Shui frowning and in a daze. Qi Shui, why are you in a daze? Lu Ming walked over and said with a smile. It's all because of you. During this period, everyone came to challenge you. You hid and cultivated, but I sent them all away. Bai Qi Shui glared at Lu Ming and pouted. Challenge me? I knew it. Lu Ming smiled. He had long known that many people would come to challenge him. It would be strange if they didn't. What's your plan? Are you going to go out and fight with them? Bai Qi Shui asked. I'm not free now. I have to go into seclusion for a while. When I come out, I'll deal with them together, Lu Ming said with a smile. Deal with them together? You're very confident. Among them, there are close to the top 100 geniuses. Although the Talisman Puppet sect is not as strong as the Emperor God Divine Palace and the Heavenly Corpse sect, there are still more than 30 geniuses ranked between 100 and 300 on the list of top 1,000 talents. These are all your opponents. Can you deal with them? Bai Qi Shui obviously didn't believe him. It's okay. Lu Ming smiled and asked, is there a quieter place here where no one will disturb us? Where even if there is a commotion, there won't be a big impact on us. Yes, the Wind Marshal Cave. It's not very useful for the cultivation of the Way of Inscription, so very few people go there. Moreover, it's full of caves. Just pick one and no one will know no matter how big the commotion is. Bai Qi Shui said. Okay, the Wind Marshal Cave it is. I'll go into seclusion for a while. After saying that, Lu Ming left Cloud Peak residence. According to the map, he turned into a beam of light and flew toward the Wind Marshal Cave. The Wind Marshal Cave was hundreds of thousands of miles away. With Lu Ming's speed, he soon arrived. The Wind Marshal Cave was full of jagged rocks. Here, there were huge rocky mountains that were more than 10,000 meters high. There were huge caves on the mountains, and the wind was blowing out from each cave. Lu Ming rushed in, randomly chose a cave, and flew in. Although Lu Ming was fast, the news that he had entered the Wind Marshal Cave was still discovered by others. Soon, the news spread throughout Liangyi Mountain. Finally, Cloud Peak residence. Chapter 870. However, when they arrived at the Wind Marshal Cave, they all stopped outside. The Wind Marshal Cave was extremely wide and had thousands of caves. No one knew which cave Lu Ming had entered, so they could only wait outside. Lu Ming entered a cave and went deeper. What rich spiritual qi! Lu Ming's eyes flashed with surprise as he ran forward. The spiritual qi in the cave was extremely rich. However, the Talisman Puppet sect mainly cultivated the Tao of Inscription and the spiritual qi was not very useful. Therefore, very few people came to the Wind Marshal Cave. Lu Ming came to an underground cave after tens of thousands of meters. Then, Lu Ming waved his hands and inscriptions entered the surroundings, setting up a large array. This large array was mainly used to isolate sound so that when he broke through, there would be too much noise. After inscribing the large array, Lu Ming sat down cross-legged. Let's upgrade the 9 Dragons bloodline in one go. Lu Ming waved his hand. This time, he took out 10 portions of blood essence of level 7 level 6 demonic beasts. The 9 Dragons bloodline opened its mouth and roared. It devoured the 10 portions of blood essence and began to refine them. The rich power of blood essence continued to flow into the 9 dragons' bloodline. A day later, the 9 sons' bloodline roared to the sky. The roar of a dragon echoed in the cave, isolating the sound in the cave. Roar. The 9 dragons' bloodline's body continued to grow. Originally, the 9 dragons' bloodline had turned into a flood dragon with 4 dragon claws on its abdomen. But now, the 5th dragon claw stretched out. It had turned into the appearance of a real dragon. However, this was not the end. After the 5th dragon claw stretched out, the 6th dragon claw stretched out. Lu Ming's eyes widened in shock. The upgrade this time was different from the previous one. After the 6th dragon claw stretched out, the dragon roar became louder and the aura of the 9 dragons' bloodline became stronger. Roar. After the roar, the 7th dragon claw stretched out, followed by the 8th and 9th dragon claw. A total of 9 dragon claws. 9 dragons. Lu Ming's bloodline had turned into the legendary 9 dragons. The 9-clawed true dragon, also known as the 9 dragons, was a mutated true dragon. It was incomparably powerful, far surpassing ordinary true dragons. It was a unique existence between heaven and earth, and was also one of the top 10 beasts that Dandan spoke of. After exploding his chakra, the 9 dragons' bloodline had evolved into the form of 9 dragons. This was the complete bloodline of the 9 dragons. After a moment of shock, Lu Ming was ecstatic. The 9 dragons roared as the 9 silver chakras merged into a golden chakra. A powerful dragon aura spread out and shook the heavens and earth. However, Liangyi Mountain had an extremely powerful array that completely isolated the 9 dragons' auras. Those outside Liangyi Mountain could not sense them. The power of devouring is several times stronger than when I was in my dragon form. Lu Ming sensed it and was overjoyed. He discovered that the devouring power of the 9 dragons was several times stronger than that of the true dragon form. This time, it was really a blessing in disguise. After his 9 dragons' bloodline exploded his chakra, he unexpectedly awakened the perfect 9 dragons form. Withdraw. With a thought, Lu Ming put away the 9 dragons' bloodline. He discovered that a stream of dragon power had condensed at his spine. I wonder what's the difference between this dragon force and the previous dragon force? Lu Ming pondered. Then, with a thought, the dragon force burst out. A layer of purple gold scales appeared on Lu Ming's skin. It covered Lu Ming's body like a suit of armor. It looked abnormally demonic. What a powerful force. Lu Ming was shocked. He felt that his body was full of power. Boom! He threw out a punch. The space quickly condensed into a ball of terrifying energy and blasted forward. Oh no! Lu Ming's face changed. He activated the 9 dragon sky-stomping steps and appeared in front of the ball of energy in an instant. He threw out a punch and blocked it. Boom! With a loud bang, Lu Ming's body shook violently and he took 8 steps back. So powerful, so powerful. Lu Ming was shocked. It was impossible to test it out here. Otherwise, the whole mountain would explode. However, Lu Ming could still feel the absolute power. This dragon force was definitely stronger than the previous one. It was at least several times stronger. When the dragon force burst out, Lu Ming's attack and defense would be greatly enhanced. The previous dragon force was the real dragon force. However, the current dragon force could be said to be the 9 dragons force. It was normal for it to be more powerful. Martial Emperor De, you didn't expect that my exploding chakra would help me in the end. It allowed me to exert the power of the 9 dragons' bloodline to the extreme. Lu Ming's eyes shone brightly and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. However, to transform into the 9 dragons form, I'm afraid that I'll need more essence blood. I still need 30 portions of class 6 LV7 essence blood. I'll upgrade the prison suppressing steel bloodline first. When the prison suppressing steel bloodline is upgraded to class 3 divine level, I'll upgrade the 9 dragons bloodline. Thinking of this, Lu Ming took out more essence blood and started to devour it. After the upgrade of the 9 dragons' bloodline, the devouring and refining power reached a terrifying level. The speed of refining the essence blood of the demonic beasts became faster. 30 portions of Class 6 LV7 essence blood were all refined in a few hours. Buzz! The prison-suppressing steel bloodline vibrated and shone brightly. 2 golden chakras shone brightly. Suddenly, a golden chakra appeared above the 2 golden chakras. 3 golden chakras and a Class 3 divine level bloodline. When the prison-suppressing steel bloodline was upgraded to Class 3 divine level, the power of the heaven-suppressing prison skill would also increase. It would reach the highest level of an upper demigod martial skill. Now that I'm using my full strength and the dragon force, how strong will my attack be? Lu Ming was looking forward to it. The prison-suppressing steel bloodline floated in the air. Lu Ming stepped on the ground and merged with the earth. What's this feeling? Lu Ming was shocked. He quickly closed his eyes and started to comprehend. Just now, when the prison-suppressing steel bloodline was upgraded, he was connected to the earth and suddenly felt something. This was a kind of inspiration. Some people said that it was a kind of enlightenment. It required a coincidence to capture this feeling and enter a mysterious state. Such a fortuitous encounter was hard to come by. Lu Ming closed his eyes. He seemed to sink into the depths of the earth and become one with it. He was the earth and the earth was him. The earth was thick, vast, vicissitudes of life. The earth was quiet and eternal. It could accommodate all things. It could suppress all things and bury the heavens and earth. This was an extremely powerful intent realm. Just like this, Lu Ming immersed himself in comprehending the intent realm. Time passed slowly. 1 day, 2 days, in the blink of an eye, 5 days had passed. Lu Ming immersed himself in comprehending the intent realm. It had been 5 days. His comprehension of the intent realm had increased by leaps and bounds. Not only did he break through to Class 2 greater success, but he was also approaching Class 2 greater perfection. 5 days was comparable to months of hard work. At this time, there was a sea of people outside the Wind Marshal Cave. Many sky prides had rushed here to wait for Lu Ming to come out. There were even more people who were here to watch the show. I'll wait here. Let's see how long this Lu Ming can hide. Chapter 871. Look, Ji Mai, ranked 107th on the list of top 1,000 talents, is here too. And senior brother Yan Tonghua, ranked 115th. Senior sister Meng Jia, ranked 118th. Someone exclaimed when they saw 3 extraordinary geniuses. These 3 geniuses were the closest to the top 100 geniuses in the Talisman Puppets sect and were the most qualified candidates for the Zongzi position. The 3 of them were expressionless with their eyes closed. They sat on a huge rock and waited quietly. Bai Qi Shui had also heard the news and rushed over. She looked anxious. Although she knew that Lu Ming was very powerful and could refine a level 6 9th tier inscription talisman, which of the top 300 god-level prodigies on the list of top 1,000 talents could not refine a level 6 9th tier inscription talisman? Especially the geniuses of the puppet sect, who could control powerful puppets and had strong combat strength. She did not think that Lu Ming could compete with such geniuses. Tianyun, stay in the Wind Marshal Cave for a while. Don't come out. Bai Qi Shui prayed in her heart. After 5 days of cultivation, Lu Ming opened his eyes in the Wind Marshal Cave. What an opportunity. You can only come across it by chance. Lu Ming smiled. However, Lu Ming did not plan to go out. Lu Ming's 4 essences of heaven and earth had all reached greater mastery of level 2. He could continue to improve his cultivation. Lu Ming intended to increase his cultivation level before leaving this place. He sat cross-legged and waved his hand. A pile of origin stones appeared on the ground and the 9 dragons' bloodline appeared. He opened his mouth and inhaled. At least 200 origin stones exploded and the origin chi was devoured by the 9 dragons' bloodline. Origin chi was the chi of heaven and earth. It was many times more powerful than spiritual chi. His spiritual seed churned and his true essence kept increasing. Soon, 200 origin stones were refined, and another 200 were devoured. Rumble. His true essence churned like a tsunami. After half a day, the rumbling stopped. 7th level spiritual sea. Lu Ming broke through to the 7th layer of the spiritual ocean tier in one go, and the area of his spiritual ocean doubled again. However, Lu Ming didn't stop and continued to refine the source stone. After another half a day, Lu Ming's cultivation rose to the peak of the 7th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, and only then did he stop cultivating. In total, he had consumed 3,000 origin stones. Fortunately, I have the wealth left behind by Senior Jiuyang. Otherwise, it would be really difficult to move forward. Lu Ming smiled. It was time to go out. He had been in seclusion at Wind Marshal Cave for exactly 8 days. In these 8 days, his strength had risen to a terrifying height. With a faint smile, Lu Ming walked out. When he exited the Fengwu cave, Lu Ming was stunned. Outside, there was a dense crowd of people surrounding the Wind Marshal Cave. Nest, aren't these people too proactive? Are you all waiting for me here? With a thought, Lu Ming guessed what was going on. He was speechless. Tian Yun came out. The moment Lu Ming came out, someone shouted. Countless pairs of eyes looked at Lu Ming in unison. So young, very ordinary, I thought he had 3 heads and 6 arms. Not ordinary, don't you think he's very handsome? Pay, love-struck fool, get lost. Instantly, a burst of miscellaneous discussions sounded out. There were many young girls whose eyes shone, feeling that Lu Ming was very handsome, which attracted the displeasure of many young men. Shua. A figure strode out and arrived in front of Lu Ming, his gaze dark as he said, Tian Yun, you finally came out. I thought you were going to hide like a coward. Today, I'll see where you're going to run. The one who spoke was Rising Sunday. He was the first one who couldn't help but step forward. Lu Ming glanced at him and said indifferently, looks like I didn't beat you last time, and you're really itching for a beating. Fine, I'll fulfill your wish today. After saying that, Lu Ming strode forward. Today, there were so many people gathered here, so he would make an example out of him so that he wouldn't be annoyed to death by these people. You're courting death. Rising Sun's eyes turned cold. With a wave of his hand, 7 huge puppets appeared in front of him. Among them, 3 were equivalent to the 9th layer of the spiritual sea realm, and 4 were equivalent to the peak of the 8th layer. The 7 puppets together were equivalent to the peak of the 9th layer of the spiritual sea realm. Rising Sun could be ranked in the top 300 of the list of top 1,000 talents and was called a god-level genius, so his battle strength was definitely not weak. Being able to control 7 powerful puppets at once, his battle strength was definitely not inferior to Wang Haoxian and Long Qianli's. The 7 puppets roared and pounced on Lu Ming. Tianyun, watch out! Bai Qi shouted in the crowd. Lu Ming smiled slightly, and without stopping, he slapped out. This stunned many people. Lu Ming actually wanted to fight the puppets with his flesh and blood? Many people sneered in their hearts. Puppets were made of all kinds of hard and powerful metals and were invulnerable. How could flesh and blood resist them? But in the next moment, their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Bang! Lu Ming slapped a puppet at the peak of the 8th layer of the spiritual sea realm. This puppet, which weighed millions of kilograms, was directly sent flying and exploded into a pile of scrap iron in the air. Bang! Bang! Lu Ming used both his hands and feet like a terrifying god of war. With a punch, a puppet exploded. With a kick, a puppet exploded. Whether it was a puppet at the peak of the 8th or 9th layer of the spiritual sea realm, they all ended up the same. In an instant, they turned into a pile of scrap iron. Countless people rubbed their eyes hard, thinking that they were dreaming. How could this be? How could this be? Inscribers focused on cultivating spiritual flames. The strength of their bodies was much weaker than that of martial artists. They had never seen such a direct, domineering, and violent method of battle. They had directly used their bodies to crush their puppets and turn them into scrap metal. Lu Ming strode forward, charging towards the rising sun. Impossible. How could this be? Rising Sun roared, and an inscription scroll appeared in his hand. As soon as he opened it, a battle sword appeared, slashing down towards Lu Ming's head. This inscription scroll had the attack power of the peak of the 9th layer of the spiritual sea realm. But Lu Ming waved his hand, and the battle sword collapsed. Lu Ming's figure instantly appeared in front of the rising sun, slapping out. Pa! The crisp sound of the slap resounded throughout the whole place. Many people felt their gums ache, and Rising Sun screamed even more. His teeth flew out mixed with blood, and half of his face swelled up high. Pa! With a flip of his hand, he gave Shuri another slap, causing him to become dizzy and disorientated. Then, he kicked out, and Rising Sun flew out, lying on the ground and screaming like a dead fish. Many people gasped. This Tianyun was too overbearing and violent. He defeated the Rising Sun so easily. After all, the Rising Sun was a god-level genius. How dare you, Tianyun? How could you be so vicious and injure your fellow disciples? You're guilty. A genius stronger than the Rising Sun yelled. Don't talk nonsense. If you want to fight, then fight. If you don't, then get lost. Lu Ming looked towards the source of the voice. It was a young man with a jade crown on his head. He was fair and clean. To put it simply, he was a pretty boy. Guan Rong, ranked 259th on the list of top 1,000 talents. Chapter 872. Ranked 259 on the list of top 1,000 talents, he was much stronger than the Rising Sun. How arrogant. Let me defeat you. Guan Rong's face darkened at Lu Ming's rebuke. He strode forward, and with every step, dense runes appeared on the ground. Roar! A ferocious tiger condensed and pounced on Lu Ming. After the tiger, there were also giant bears, pythons, and other beasts. In an instant, more than a dozen beasts pounced on Lu Ming. Guan Rong's array Dao was extremely terrifying to be able to set up so many arrays in an instant. His use of the spiritual fire had also reached the peak of the nuance realm, which was on par with Lu Ming. As these beasts pounced on Lu Ming, Guan Rong waved his hand and 3 inscription scrolls appeared in front of him. The 3 inscriptions were activated at the same time, and 3 dragons roared and pounced. Their attack power was equivalent to the peak of the 9th level of the spiritual sea realm. This kind of attack was like a storm. An ordinary martial artist at the 9th level of the spiritual sea realm would be submerged and torn to pieces. The fighting style of an inscription master was completely different from that of a martial artist. Lu Ming was expressionless. He strode forward and struck out with his palm. The space rumbled violently, and the beasts that pounced on him collapsed instantly. What followed were the 3 dragons. Boom! 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 4 kinds of realm of heaven and earth wrapped around him. He activated the hell-suppressing heaven skill at 20% power and clashed with the 3 dragons. Lu Ming did not dare to activate the hell-suppressing heaven skill at full power. Its power was equivalent to the 6th level of an upper-grade demigod martial skill, and the consumption of true essence was extremely terrifying. With Lu Ming's current cultivation, if he used it at full power, his true essence would be drained in a few moves. With 3 roars, the 3 dragons were defeated. Guan Rong's pupils contracted sharply. In an instant, an array appeared on his body and formed a pair of wings. With a flap of his wings, he retreated like a bolt of lightning. At the same time, he waved his hand and 5 inscription scrolls appeared in front of him. 2 of them transformed into halos that enveloped Guan Rong's body. These were protective talismans that were indestructible. Of the other 3 inscription scrolls, 2 of them condensed into 2 battle swords and slashed towards Lu Ming. They also had the power of the peak of the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier. The most shocking thing was that the inscription scroll in the middle condensed into a long spear and stabbed towards Lu Ming. The power emitted by this long spear was terrifying and shocking, exceeding the range of the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier. If it had to be categorized, it was a 6th level inscription charm scroll. Lu Ming's expression turned grave. He condensed 2 spears in his hands and shot them out, colliding with the 2 swords. His palm landed on the spear. Explode! Lu Ming growled as the spear exploded. Lu Ming used the 9 dragons' heaven-stomping steps and appeared in front of Guan Rong in just a few steps. His palm was like a sharp sword, piercing forward. Puff! Puff! The 2 light screens in front of Guan Rong shattered like paper. No! Guan Rong screamed and retreated like lightning, but Lu Ming was faster and followed closely behind. He stretched out his palm and grabbed Guan Rong's throat. True essence shook, and Guan Rong's body went soft like mud. Lu Ming swung his hand, and Guan Rong fell heavily to the ground beside the rising sun. All around, everyone stared in shock. This Lu Ming was too strong. He defeated Guan Rong with such ease. This made the other geniuses' expressions turn ugly. Haven't you waited for a long time? If you want to fight, then hurry up and come at me together. I don't have that much time to play with you. Lu Ming looked around and said coldly. Lu Ming planned to establish his power today. Arrogant, too arrogant. You think you're invincible after defeating the rising sun and Guan Rong? Ridiculous. Since he wants to die, let's fight him together. Let's see how strong he is. Cold voices rang out. One by one, figures stepped forward, and a powerful spiritual storm erupted and filled the area. There were more than a dozen god-level geniuses who were ranked in the top 300 of the list of top 1,000 talents. Some of them were even ranked in the top 200. However, Ji Mai, Yan Tonghua, and Meng Jia did not step forward. Instead, they watched from afar. Obviously, the 3 of them did not want to join forces to fight Lu Ming. Cut the crap. Let's fight. Lu Ming's eyes were full of fighting spirit. He had made great progress this time and wanted to fight. Arrogant. Let's fight together. With a cold shout, more than 50 huge puppets appeared on the ground. The weakest puppet was equivalent to the 9th level of the spiritual sea realm, while the strongest puppet was far stronger. The puppet roared furiously. It stomped on the ground and pounced on Lu Ming. Some of them had inscription scrolls appear in front of them. Dazzling light emanated from these scrolls, emitting a terrifying aura. Good timing. The fighting spirit in Lu Ming's eyes grew stronger. The power of the 9 dragons in his 9 dragons bloodline burst out, and a layer of purple gold scales appeared on his body. What's that? Many people gasped. A secret skill of martial arts. Someone said. Boom. Lu Ming stomped on the ground, and the rocks exploded. Lu Ming rushed out. Boom. Boom. His fists punched out continuously, colliding with the puppets. Bang! 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 The sound of explosions rose and fell. The puppets in the 9th level of the spiritual sea realm exploded like fragile balloons. Lu Ming's battle strength was too terrifying when he combined the dragon power with the prison-suppressing heaven steel. Not only puppets at the 9th level of the spiritual sea realm, even those puppets above the 9th level of the spiritual sea realm would be blown apart. Such a scene was incomparably terrifying. The inscription scrolls glowed, and all kinds of powerful attacks poured down on Lu Ming. There were endless flames, lightning, storms, battle swords, saber auras, and so on. Every one of them was extremely terrifying, far surpassing the 9th level of the spiritual sea realm. The battle strength of these prodigies all surpassed the peak of the 9th level of the spiritual sea realm. Ordinary 9th level spiritual sea realm experts would be blasted into dregs in an instant. However, Lu Ming was fearless. His body was covered in dragon scales and he was invulnerable. He charged forward and every inch of his body could release the hell-suppressing heaven skill. Those attacks exploded with a loud bang. Lu Ming broke through the layers of attacks and charged toward those elites. Not good, retreat. More than a dozen prodigies' faces flashed with shock. Each of them used inscription arrays and retreated rapidly. At the same time, every step they took would leave inscriptions on the ground. At the same time, a large number of puppets and inscription scrolls appeared. This time, many puppets actually formed a large array. Together, their aura was even more shocking. Moreover, some people took out even more powerful inscription scrolls. These people were called god-level prodigies. Their battle strength was extremely terrifying, and they could compete with the prodigies of Emperor Heaven Divine Palace and Heavenly Corpse Sect. Naturally, they were very strong. But Lu Ming was even stronger. During the previous exchange meet in Nine Dragon City, Lu Ming's combat ability was already extremely terrifying. He was definitely able to fight against the top 200 people. This time, Lu Ming's Earth concept had a breakthrough. All 4 concepts had reached level 2 greater mastery. When they were combined and unleashed, their power was even stronger. At the same time, the power of the 9 dragons was also stronger. It was several times stronger than the dragon power in the past. Also, his cultivation level had increased to the peak of the 7th level of the spiritual sea realm. Now, Lu Ming was completely confident that he could fight with Di Feng and Shi Mo, who were ranked 101 and 102 on the list of top 1,000 prodigies. Chapter 873. Lu Ming's current combat strength was infinitely close to that of a spirit embryo realm expert. Lu Ming could even contend with an ordinary spirit embryo realm expert. Among the younger generation, he was unafraid of anyone other than the top 100 heavens prides on the list of top 1,000 talents. Boom! Lu Ming was like an Archean ferocious beast as he charged through the puppets violently, and savagely. Boom! 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 He used his berserk methods to break through the battle formation formed by the puppets. With a single punch, the weaker puppets were directly blown apart. The stronger puppets were also sent flying, their bodies deformed. Some of the flames and lightning were blocked by the scales on Lu Ming's skin. Bam! Lu Ming consecutively sent 9 powerful puppets flying and appeared in front of a puppet sect's Heaven's Pride. The Heaven's Pride's eyes widened and he wanted to retreat, but Lu Ming hit him so hard that he vomited blood. He reached out and threw the Heaven's Pride to the side of the rising sun and Guan Rong. There were 3 figures lying on the ground, unable to get up. Bam! After dealing with this Heaven's Pride, Lu Ming leaped into the sky and destroyed 2 blazing fireballs, a thunder sword, and a dragon formed by ice. He appeared in front of a talisman sect's pride and punched through the talisman defense. His vital essence surged into the Heaven's Pride, and the Heaven's Pride went limp. Lu Ming threw him to the side of the rising sun and the rest. Swoosh! In the next moment, Lu Ming used the 9 dragons' heaven-stomping steps and attacked another Heaven's Pride at lightning speed. Lu Ming defeated all the puppets and inscription scrolls. One by one, the figures were sent flying by Lu Ming and fell to the side of the rising sun and the rest. The surrounding spectators were all dumbfounded. Their jaws were about to drop as they watched everything unfold in disbelief. More than 10 god-level prodigies joined forces, but in front of Lu Ming, they were unable to put up any resistance. They were completely crushed and sent flying one by one. Lu Ming threw them on the ground like rubbish and piled them up. In just a few minutes, more than a dozen people were thrown to the ground by Lu Ming. They were all furious and ashamed. I admit defeat. Some of the remaining Heaven's Pride's pride shouted, wanting to admit defeat. They were truly frightened by Lu Ming's terrifying combat strength. You want to fight, but you don't want to fight. How can there be such a good thing? I forbid it. Lu Ming's gaze was like lightning. His figure was like an ancient beast as he dashed toward the other party. Bam! Ah! Heaven's Pride was thrown to the ground to Heaven's Pride. Then, Lu Ming's figure flashed and another 2 Heaven's Prides were sent flying. Tianyun, this is the Talisman Puppet Sect. What's the point of using martial arts to win? If you have the ability, use the Tao of Inscription. One of the last remaining Heaven's Pride shouted. However, just as he finished speaking, the puppet protecting him was sent flying by Lu Ming. He was also sent flying by Lu Ming's kick and smashed into the pile of Heaven's Prides, causing them to scream in pain. The scene quietened down. More than a dozen Heaven's Prides were piled together and roaring in anger. The surrounding Talisman Puppet Sect disciples were stunned, unable to believe what they were seeing. These were the few god-level Heaven's Prides of the Talisman Puppet Sect. Although the Talisman Puppet Sect's territory couldn't be compared to the Emperor Heaven Divine Palace, it still had more than 30 large regions. There were countless Heaven's Prides, but there were less than 50 god-level Heaven's Prides. Which of these Heaven's Prides wasn't high and mighty? They were like stars surrounding the moon, looking down on other people of the younger generation. But now, more than a dozen of them were piled together like a pile of trash. They were roaring in anger and screaming in pain. It was a tragic sight. This scene was too illusory and unreal. Slap. There were even people who slapped themselves to see if they were dreaming. Bai Qi Shui was also dumbfounded. She didn't expect Lu Ming to be so powerful. More than a dozen Heaven's Prides were defeated in an instant. He was ridiculously powerful. She recalled the attitude she had towards Lu Ming when she first met him. Her heart couldn't help but beat faster. She was afraid. If Lu Ming went crazy, a weak woman like her wouldn't be able to withstand it. This guy is so strong, but he didn't tell me. Humph. Bai Qi Shui snorted coldly in her heart. Ji Mai, Yan Tonghua, and Meng Jia were also incomparably shocked. They looked at Lu Ming in shock. Lu Ming's strength was also beyond their expectations. The 3 of them were all ranked in the top 120 on the list of top 1,000 talents. Their combat strength was naturally terrifying. But they weren't confident that they could defeat more than a dozen god-level Heaven's Prides like Lu Ming did. Even if this guy's combat strength can't compare to those in the top 100, he's probably close to Di Feng, Shi Mo, and the others. Our Talisman Puppet Sect has such a powerful martial way expert, and he's so young? Ji Mai whispered, full of shock and astonishment. He was ranked 107th on the list of top 1,000 talents, but he didn't think he could do this. Phew. Lu Ming let out a long breath. He felt that the true essence in his spiritual sea had been greatly depleted. In the storm of attacks just now, the hell-suppressing Heaven's skill had unleashed more than 20% of its power. Tianyun, you're using martial way. What's so great about you? If you're so capable, use the inscription way to fight us. A young man shouted, his eyes spitting fire. He was extremely ashamed and indignant. That's right. You're a Zongzi candidate, but you can only use martial way to fight. Who's convinced? A Zongzi candidate will compete for the position of Zongzi in the future, and then inherit the position of Talisman Puppet Sect leader. If he's only strong in martial way and weak in the inscription way, how can he inherit the position of sect leader and lead the Talisman Puppet Sect? The other Heaven's Prides also shouted. The eyes of the spectators flashed. Indeed, they couldn't deny that Lu Ming was powerful. If Lu Ming was just an ordinary disciple of the Talisman Puppet Sect, he would be respected by others because of his strong martial way, even if his inscription way was weak. However, Lu Ming's identity was different. He was a Zongzi candidate who would compete for the position of Zongzi in the future, and even become the Talisman Puppet Sect leader. He had to be strong in the inscription way to convince others. Otherwise, no matter how strong his martial way was, he wouldn't be qualified to inherit the position of sect leader. How about this? Ji Mai suddenly spoke, attracting everyone's attention. Was Ji Mai going to attack? Lu Ming also looked at Ji Mai. 2 months later, the sect will hold a competition to compete for the spot to enter the Sky Observation Platform. The Sky Observation Platform is the #1 cultivation sacred ground of the Talisman Puppet sect. Apart from the other 13 Zongzi candidates, all the other young geniuses will participate. Brother Tianyun, why don't you participate in the competition and spar with them? Ji Mai said with a smile. Although he said it in a tactful manner, it was equivalent to inviting Lu Ming to participate in the competition 2 months later to compete for the spot to enter the Sky Observation Platform. Martial arts were of no use in that kind of competition. By then, Lu Ming's inscription Dao would naturally be able to tell how capable he was. All right, I agree. Lu Ming replied indifferently. Chapter 874. Hearing Lu Ming's agreement, Ji Mai, Yan Tonghua, and Meng Jia's eyes lit up. The prodigies who were thrown together by Lu Ming also had different expressions. Some of them gritted their teeth. They were determined to fight in 2 months' time to regain the face that they had lost today. Some of them were deep in thought. Lu Ming agreed so quickly. Could it be that his Dao of inscription was also extremely powerful? But how was that possible? Martial Dao was already so abnormal, how strong could the Dao of inscription be? The true yuan in your body will disperse in 2 hours. Lu Ming looked at the youths who were still lying on the ground, smiled faintly, and stepped into the air to leave. Hey, Tianyun, wait for me. Bai Qi Shui immediately followed, like a little shadow. This made the rising sun and other prodigies who were pursuing Bai Qi Shui gnash their teeth in jealousy, but no one dared to find trouble with Lu Ming. What a joke, Lu Ming's martial Dao was so strong, was he looking for trouble? Lu Ming and Bai Qi Shui swaggered out of the place. Your martial Dao cultivation is actually so strong? You actually didn't tell me? On the way, Bai Qi Shui stared at Lu Ming and muttered. You didn't ask me. Lu Ming said. You're so strong. You should be very famous, why haven't I heard of you before? Bai Qi Shui showed a puzzled expression. Because I'm more low-key, I've always been low-key, it's normal that you don't know me. Lu Ming said shamelessly, which immediately attracted Bai Qi Shui's disdain. You're low-key? You defeated more than 10 god-level prodigies in one go. I'm afraid in 2 days, the news will spread throughout Lianyi Mountain. Bai Qi Shui glanced at Lu Ming and said disdainfully. Lu Ming touched his nose, he was also forced to do this, right? You really want to participate in the competition in 2 months? Bai Qi Snow asked again. Of course, I've agreed. By the way, what's the sky viewing platform? What's so special about it? Lu Ming asked curiously. The Sky Observation Platform is also known as the Sky Observation Ground. It can be said to be the #1 cultivation holy land of the Talisman Puppet sect. It is said that one can come into close contact with the law of inscription at the Sky Observation Ground. The speed at which one absorbs the energy from the law of inscription is terrifyingly fast. However, the amount of energy required to activate the Sky Observation Ground is extremely terrifying. Therefore, the number of people who can enter each time is extremely limited. The other 13 Zongzi candidates have already entered. This time, only 3 of them will be allowed to enter the Sky Observatory. Therefore, the competition will be held in the entire sect. Only the top 3 will be allowed to enter the Sky Observatory to cultivate for a month. Bai Qi Snow explained. Lu Ming nodded. He had a rough idea. Are you confident? Bai Qi asked, blinking her large eyes. She was extremely curious. No. Lu Ming's reply made Bai Qi Snow stagger and almost fall. No? If you're not confident, why did you agree? Bai Qi Snow asked. If I agree, there will be at least 2 months of peace, right? Lu Ming smiled faintly. He was indeed not fully confident. After all, he had only been in contact with the inscription Dao for a short period of time. The other geniuses had been cultivating for more than 10 years. especially for geniuses like Ji Mai, Yan Tonghua, and Meng Jia. Lu Ming was not confident of winning by relying on the inscription Dao. Lu Ming was confident that his spirit fire was not inferior to Ji Mai and the others. One had to know that Lu Ming had lit 10 spirit lamps at each level and reached the perfect level. No matter how talented Ji Mai and the others were, it was impossible for them to reach the perfect level. It was already very terrifying to be able to light up 8 spirit lamps at each level. Lu Ming's weakness was the use of spirit fire. His use of spirit fire had already reached the peak of the minute's subtlety. In the eyes of ordinary geniuses, it was already very terrifying, not weaker than many god-grade geniuses. However, Lu Ming believed that geniuses like Ji Mai were definitely not just at the peak of the minute's subtlety. Perhaps, they had already reached the heart of perfection realm. The higher one's mastery of the mental fire, the greater one's combat power would be under the same mental fire. His current weakness was the use of spirit fire. Bai Qixue was speechless. It turned out that Lu Ming agreed so that he could have 2 months of peace. Soon, the two returned to Cloud Peak residence. Yes, I have to buy another batch of blood essence to continue improving my bloodline. Back in his room, Lu Ming fell into deep thought. And the third bloodline, I don't know why. I still can't awaken it. Thinking of this, Lu Ming frowned. Many god-grade geniuses had awakened their third bloodline before reaching the 7th level of the spiritual sea realm, but he still couldn't awaken it. He could clearly feel that something seemed to be nurturing in his spine, but it couldn't awaken. He always felt that something was missing. Shaoqing and Fatty also awakened slower than others. I don't know if it's good or bad. Also, I can't just let the competition in 2 months go. I have to shock those people so that they won't find trouble with me in the future. It's also very beneficial for me to take charge of the Talisman Puppets sect in the future. Lu Ming's mind was constantly spinning with various thoughts. However, it wasn't that easy to shock all these god-grade geniuses. If I can improve the use of spirit fire, I'll be much more confident. I wonder where I can train the use of spirit fire in the Heaven and Earth Mountain. Thinking of this, Lu Ming took out the map that Bai Qi Snow gave him and opened it. After a long while, Lu Ming's eyes lit up. The Mind Tempering Hall was a cultivation place that specialized in training the use of spirit fire. The Talisman Puppets sect was indeed an overlord force that specialized in the inscription Dao. They had everything. Lu Ming was now a candidate Zongzi. Apart from a few places that he couldn't go, he could enter most of the cultivation places. It was a good opportunity to cultivate. Immediately, Lu Ming took out the origin stone and began to devour it to recover his true yuan. Before long, Lu Ming's true yuan had completely recovered. He left the Cloud Peak residence and headed to the Mind Tempering Hall. The Mind Tempering Hall was a large hall, but it was filled with arrays and could accommodate many people to cultivate. Lu Ming flashed his candidate Zongzi token and entered easily. After entering the hall, he realized that there were many light doors. At a glance, there were at least a few hundred of them. Lu Ming walked inside and chose a light door in a secluded corner. On the light door, there were words written: primary, intermediate, advanced, and peak. This should be a choice of difficulty. I'll choose the intermediate. Lu Ming pressed on the words intermediate, and saw the 2 words intermediate shining brightly. Then, he took a step forward and stepped into the light door. When he walked into the light door, he realized that he was in a spacious void. In this place, Lu Ming realized that the true yuan in his body was suppressed. Even his mental state was suppressed. Only the spirit fire could be used. Whoosh! A blue arrow pierced towards Lu Ming at lightning speed. An arrow condensed by the spirit fire. Chapter 875. Lu Ming's forehead glowed, and an even more powerful wisp of psychic fire shot out, forming an arrow that shot towards the arrow in front of him. But just as the 2 arrows were about to collide, the arrow that was shooting towards him suddenly turned nimbly, dodging Lu Ming's arrow and continuing to shoot towards Lu Ming. Lu Ming wanted to turn, but it was too late. He could only condense more psychic fire arrows and shoot them at the incoming arrow. Pfft! That arrow was finally intercepted by Lu Ming and neutralized. But at this time, more arrows condensed from the surroundings and shot towards Lu Ming. These arrows were incomparably nimble. They were like nimble little snakes dancing in the air as they shot towards Lu Ming. Lu Ming controlled his psychic fire, but he couldn't keep up with the speed of these arrows. He could only release more psychic fire and use numbers to block the arrows. But this was very taxing on Lu Ming's psychic fire. Soon, his psychic fire was exhausted. Whoosh! Whoosh! With his psychic fire exhausted, Lu Ming could no longer block the arrows. They immediately hit his body, and he felt a tearing pain in his mind. His vision darkened, and in the next moment, Lu Ming discovered that he had returned to the door of light from before. It's only the intermediate difficulty, but it's already so difficult. It seems that my control over the psychic fire isn't that great. Lu Ming smiled bitterly and stepped back into the door of light. In the next moment, he was back in the void. Whoosh! Blue arrows condensed from the surroundings and shot towards him. It was said that in the mind-tempering palace, the amount and quality of the psychic fire condensed from the arrows was exactly the same as the person who entered. In order to completely block these arrows, one had to condense a psychic fire of the same quantity as the attacking psychic fire. Moreover, one's psychic fire had to intercept the opponent's psychic fire. Only then could the psychic fire attack be completely neutralized. As long as one's psychic fire was stronger than the opponent's, then the number of arrows condensed would definitely be less than the opponent's. Just like Lu Ming had done before, he could use violent attacks to block the first few arrows. But soon, his psychic power was exhausted, and he could only take a beating from the back. But these arrows were too nimble. It was too difficult to perfectly block them. One had to have precise control over their psychic fire. At the same time, they had to be very good at using their psychic fire. Only then could they completely block them. Lu Ming was fully focused on controlling his mental flame to fend off the arrows that were shot from all directions. This time, Lu Ming lasted a little longer. Those arrows were too nimble. Lu Ming couldn't keep up with the opponent's speed at all by himself. He could only unleash a large number of psychic arrows to block them. In this way, his psychic power was exhausted again. The arrows pierced through his body, and Lu Ming was sent out of the door of light again. Continue. Continue. Lu Ming stepped into the door of light again and again, practicing the use of his psychic fire. Slowly, he became more and more familiar with the use of his psychic fire. He could barely keep up with the opponent's speed and neutralize those arrows. But he still couldn't do it perfectly. In the end, he would still be shot and sent out of the door of light. In the blink of an eye, Lu Ming had cultivated here for 7 days. Whoosh! 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 More than 10 arrows were flying in the air. Lu Ming controlled the arrows that were condensed from his mental fire and blocked the arrows that were flying toward him. In the end, when Lu Ming's psychic fire was exhausted, there were no more arrows shooting at him. With a perfect defense, Lu Ming smoothly passed the intermediate level. Right now, my use of the psychic fire has greatly improved. I'm already infinitely close to the Heart of Perfection realm. Lu Ming thought to himself. When two people had the same amount of psychic fire, the higher the level of their psychic fire, the more puppets they could control, and the stronger the puppets they could control, the stronger their fighting power would be. Moreover, those with a higher level of psychic fire would be able to carve formations and inscription talismans faster. Whether it was refining pills or forging tools, they would be stronger. This was the benefit of having a higher level of psychic fire. The subtle realm was the meticulous use of the psychic fire. Not a single bit would be wasted, and one would be able to display its full potential. The Heart of Perfection realm was just as its name implied. With a single thought, the psychic fire would move with unparalleled speed. At this level, whether it was controlling puppets or inscribing formations, they were all terrifyingly fast. To be able to inscribe formations in a few moments, just how strong was one? It could be said that if two people with the same amount of psychic fire reached the heart of perfection realm, they would be able to easily kill a subtle realm expert. As for the mind of perfection and Shinha realms, they were even more wondrous. The intermediate level is no longer enough for me to improve. It's time to choose the advanced level. At that moment, Lu Ming chose the advanced difficulty level and stepped into it. A few seconds after he entered, there was a flash of light, and Lu Ming reappeared. This is too fast. Lu Ming bitterly smiled. The arrows that appeared in the advanced level were ridiculously fast and nimble, able to make several hundred turns in an instant. Lu Ming's psychic fire arrows simply couldn't keep up. The moment he entered, he was killed before he could even block a single arrow. The difference was too great. It seems like I'll have to cultivate in the intermediate level for a while longer. With a bitter smile, Lu Ming chose the intermediate level and began to cultivate. In the blink of an eye, another 7 days passed. The ish. Lu Ming's use of the psychic fire was getting better and better. Under his control, the arrows formed from the psychic fire were becoming more and more nimble, moving at frightening speeds. Fwoosh. Fwoosh. He controlled an arrow and shot it through the middle of the arrow shaft of the opponent's arrow. The remaining power didn't stop there, and it even cancelled out the other arrow. Lu Ming could use one arrow to negate 2 arrows formed from the same amount of psychic fire. When no more arrows were formed, Lu Ming only had half of his psychic fire left. Lu Ming's use of the psychic fire had improved yet again, but he still felt that he hadn't reached the heart of perfection realm. Now, I should be able to try the advanced level. Lu Ming exited this place, chose the high difficulty level, and stepped in. The ish. An arrow, as fast as lightning, moved at high speed in the air, changing hundreds of directions in an instant, leaving a long trail behind. Lu Ming controlled an arrow, but he couldn't keep up with the speed of the other party. He controlled the 9 arrows to attack from different directions. The ish. 9 arrows, in different directions, flew through the air and blocked that arrow. With a bang, that arrow was finally blocked. But before Lu Ming could rejoice, 2 more arrows formed and flew toward Lu Ming. Lu Ming could only condense more arrows to block. This time, Lu Ming only lasted half a minute before he was teleported out. Continue. Chapter 876. He stepped in again and again, but failed again and again. Just like that, another 7 days passed. Lu Ming had been cultivating in the Spirit Training Palace for more than 20 days. Lu Ming was cultivating like a maniac. He was practicing his usage of the mental fire like a maniac. Whoosh! Outside the light door, a light flashed and Lu Ming's figure appeared. I know. So that's how it is. Lu Ming muttered to himself, his eyes shining with excitement. After cultivating for so long, he finally caught a trace of inspiration, the inspiration to break through hard intent. Then, he sat cross-legged and carefully comprehended that inspiration. He sat there for an entire day. After a day, he suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were calm, but they revealed a ray of confidence. Then, he stepped into the light door and stood in the void. Whoosh! A blue arrow, as fast as lightning, made a few hundred turns in the air and shot toward Lu Ming. Lu Ming's glabella shone and an arrow condensed. Go! Lu Ming's mind moved and the arrow flew out. In the next moment, it accurately appeared in front of the arrow and collided with it. Whoosh! Whoosh! In the next moment, 2 arrows appeared and shot toward Lu Ming from 2 directions. Lu Ming's mind moved and 2 arrows also flew out. After making a few hundred turns in the air, they caught up with the 2 arrows and cancelled them out. Hard intent, this is hard intent. I finally broke through. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile. Whoosh! 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 The arrows flew everywhere, but they could no longer hit Lu Ming. In the end, all the arrows were blocked by Lu Ming. Lu Ming's use of the spirit fire had finally broken through and reached the early stage of hard intent. However, Lu Ming did not stop. Instead, he continued to cultivate. He did not choose the top difficulty but continued to cultivate in the high difficulty. The top difficulty was said to be for people at the level of intent. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, Lu Ming had already spent 50 days in the mental tempering hall. There were still 10 days until the competition on the observation platform. On the other hand, Lu Ming's usage of the spirit flame had already reached the late stage of heart satisfaction. To advance from arcane subtlety pinnacle to heart perception advanced stage in just 50 days, if anyone were to hear of this, they would surely be flabbergasted. After all, heart focus was a realm that only 7th grade inscriptionists could grasp. 6th grade inscriptionists were already geniuses amongst geniuses if they could grasp it. Anyone could come to the spirit training hall, but whose progress would be this fast? It could be seen from this that Lu Ming had extremely high talent towards the Tao of inscription. It's time to go out and buy a batch of essence blood. It's been so long, there should be enough. Lu Ming pondered as he left the spirit tempering palace and flew towards the treasure pavilion. During this period, Lu Ming went to the treasure pavilion once and ordered a batch of demonic beast blood essence. Soon, they arrived at the treasure pavilion. "Beauty, how's the demonic beast blood essence I ordered?" Lu Ming asked with a smile. It was still the same beauty from before. "Junior brother Tianyun, you're here." The beauty stared at Lu Ming with her big eyes, full of splendor. Now, Lu Ming was a celebrity in the talisman puppet sect. Who didn't know that he had fought against more than 10 god-level geniuses? The 50 Class 8 LV6 Demonic Beast Blood Essences and 50 Class 9 LV6 Demonic Beast Blood Essences that you asked for took a lot of effort. The beauty smiled and took out a storage ring. "Thank you." Lu Ming smiled, put away the storage ring, and then handed the origin stones to the other party. It was a total of 60,000 origin stones. This was the price after the discount because he had bought so many origin stones. That's really expensive. Lu Ming sighed. He really couldn't afford the demonic beast blood essence. It seemed that after using this batch, he would have to hunt them himself. Lu Ming thought to himself. The origin stones that Supreme Nine Sons had left behind were only about 1 million. If he continued to use them like this, it wouldn't be long before they were all gone. I'll have to use them sparingly. Lu Ming made up his mind. After paying the origin stones, Lu Ming went to Cloud Peak residence. Along the way, when people saw Lu Ming, they all looked at Lu Ming with awe and curiosity. The competition will be in 10 days. Tianyun's martial Tao is strong, but his inscription Tao might not be. That's right. 10 days later, we'll see. If his inscription Tao isn't good, no matter how strong his martial Tao is, he'll have to step down from the candidate Zhongzi's throne. Many people were talking about it, looking forward to the competition in 10 days. Lu Ming returned to Cloud Peak residence and saw Bai Qi Shui seriously inscribing inscription talisman scrolls. Her jade-like fingers were slender and beautiful. As she danced in the air, inscriptions flew into the talisman paper. Peak of minutes subtlety. Lu Ming's eyes moved. After not seeing each other for a while, Bai Qi Shui had also made great progress. Her use of spiritual fire had reached the peak of minute subtlety. Not long after, a level 6 7th level inscription talisman scroll was successfully inscribed. Tianyun, you're back. Where have you been cultivating all this time? How's the progress? Bai Qi Shui's eyes lit up when she saw Lu Ming. It's okay, there's some progress. Lu Ming said. Some progress? Why don't we have a competition to see who's faster in inscription? Bai Qi Shui said, her eyes flashing with eagerness. Lu Ming smiled in his heart. This girl had broken through and wanted to show off in front of Lu Ming. Sure, how do we compete? Lu Ming said with a smile. Let's go outside. How about we compete in inscribing array formations? Bai Chi Shui said with some excitement. Okay, but since it's a competition, there needs to be some punishment, right? If you lose, how will you be punished? Lu Ming said with a smile. How will I be punished? Bai Chi Shui blinked her big eyes. How about this, if you lose, you kiss me. If I lose, I'll kiss you. How about it? Lu Ming smiled. You, who wants to kiss you? You rascal. Bai Chi Shui's face flushed red with embarrassment. Ha ha ha. Lu Ming laughed. He didn't mean it. It was just that he had a breakthrough in the use of spiritual fire and he was in a good mood. In addition, he hadn't seen Bai Chi Shui for a long time. He just casually teased her to relax the atmosphere. If you don't agree, then forget it. Whoever loses will treat to a big meal. Lu Ming smiled and walked out of the room in big strides. Bai Chi Shui stared at Lu Ming fiercely, but there was a slight smile in her eyes. Outside Yunfeng residence, there was a large open space. The two of them stood opposite each other. Let's begin. Bai Chi Shui suddenly shouted. Both of her feet stepped on the ground. At the same time, her 10 fingers bloomed in the air. Brilliant inscriptions flew out and disappeared into the ground. Buzz! On the ground, a formation immediately emerged, shining brightly. However, Lu Ming kept smiling and stood there with his hands behind his back. He didn't move at all. This guy, why isn't he moving? Humph, he's so arrogant. See how I'll teach him a lesson. Bai Chi Shui snorted coldly. She took a step forward and the formation shone brightly. 2 snow-white eagles condensed and pounced on Lu Ming. At this moment, Lu Ming began to move. Lu Ming took a step forward and densely packed inscriptions appeared on the ground. The inscriptions intertwined with each other to form an array. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.